Chapter 11:26. Someone knocked on Chu Mu's door again. It was still Vice Commander Li Duan. "Vice Commander," Chu Mu said and invited him into the small living room. "I'm here to deliver something to you." Li Duan walked into the small living room and sat down. He frowned slightly as he spoke to Chu Mu. "But are you sure you want to exchange the privilege of the best recruit medal for that body-refining cultivation technique?" "Yes," Chu Mu replied in an affirmative tone. "I suggest that you keep the privilege for now and try your best to raise your position in the army of God within 10 years. At that time, you'll be able to exchange for the highest grade item." Li Duan said, "But since you've already made your choice, then so be it. However, although this body-refining cultivation technique is very powerful, it's incomplete and only has one level. After mastering it, you'll be at the pinnacle of the 9-star sword of Gojoseon. However, for your subsequent cultivation, you'll either have to change the cultivation technique or find a follow-up cultivation technique." "Vice Commander, I know what to do," Chu Mu said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. "Well, it's good that you know." Li Duan took out a jade that contained the contents of the first level of the astral calamity. After handing the jade to Chu Mu, he instructed Chu Mu to cultivate well and improve his strength before getting up and leaving. After sending Li Duan off, Chu Li closed the door and rushed into the cultivation room with the jade in his hand. The power of his divine sense emerged and entered the jade. Instantly, he felt the starlight that filled the sky. It was as if he was in the middle of a vast and boundless starry sky in an instant. The starlight that filled the sky gave Chu Mu a feeling of being lost. Soon after, the starlight spiraled downwards and rushed towards Chu Mu, entering Chu Mu's body. Chu Mu immediately felt waves of information surging into his mind. Half an hour later, the cultivation method jade in his hand shattered with a cracking sound. Chu Mu's eyes let out a bright light that was like starlight. He had his own reasons for using the privilege of the best recruit medal to exchange for the astral calamity body tempering technique. It was indeed a very powerful body tempering technique. He could reach the peak of the blessed realm just by mastering the first level. Compared to other body tempering techniques, it was much more powerful. The only flaw was that there was only one layer. However, by cultivating it, Chu Mu's physique would be able to reach the peak of the manifestation realm. At that time, with just his physique alone, he would be able to contend against a peak 9-star sword of Gojoseon. It was extremely powerful, and coupled with his terrifying divine wilderness sword essence, his strength would be enough to sweep away all 9-star sword of Gojoseon. However, there was still a long way to go before Chu Mu could reach the 9-star sword of Gojoseon. During this period of time, he could increase his strength while searching for the next level of the astral calamity technique. If he was lucky, he might find it. In his opinion, instead of keeping the privilege for later use, it was better to use it directly and increase his strength as much as possible without damaging his potential. He closed his eyes again and comprehended the first level of the astral calamity technique. His entire person seemed to have entered the vast and boundless starry sky. The astral calamity was indeed an extremely profound technique. Just the first level was already very difficult to comprehend. If not for Chu Mu's amazing perception, it would have taken him a very long time to comprehend it. Time passed by. Chu Mu was completely immersed in comprehending and did not even notice that there was a knock on the door. For 3 consecutive days, Chu Mu was constantly comprehending and finally succeeded in comprehending the first level of the astral calamity. For a moment, Chu Mu felt the fluctuations of the power of the stars floating around his body. The power of the stars was almost everywhere. Only in certain places could one not feel the power of the stars. As the starship sailed through the starry sky, countless amounts of power of the stars would pass through the surface of the starship and enter the interior. However, it was all filtered power of the stars. In fact, the power of the stars was not singular. Some were hot, some were cold, and some were harmful to the human body. For example, if one was not an expert of the eternal realm, his body would not be able to withstand the rays of the stars. The atmosphere of every life-bearing planet was enough to isolate most of the harmful starlight rays, and the hull of every starship had a layer of coating that could isolate the harmful starlight rays very well, allowing the harmless starlight rays to enter. The fluctuations of the power of the stars that Chu-Mu felt were the harmless rays of the stars. In the past, he had to concentrate to feel the fluctuations of the power of the stars. Now, he could easily feel the fluctuations of the power of the stars, thanks to the astral calamity body refining cultivation method. The clarity of the power of the stars was related to the efficiency of the astral calamity body refining cultivation method. Some people with outstanding talent could clearly feel the power of the stars and cultivate more easily. In places where one could clearly feel the fluctuations of the power of the stars, the effect of cultivation would be better. According to the technique, the first time I cultivate the astral calamity technique, the effects will be the most obvious, especially when it's my first time cultivating the body. I wonder if my body will be able to improve significantly after cultivating it, thought Chu-Mu. Now that he had finished comprehending, the next step was to cultivate. Strictly speaking, this was Chu-Mu's first time using a cultivation method to refine his body. Holding his breath, he cleared his mind and entered the state. The fluctuations of the power of the stars around him suddenly became clearer. Following the method of the first level of the astral calamity body refining cultivation method, he began to cultivate. Instantly, the power of the stars around him was attracted and rushed into Chu-Mu's body. As soon as the power entered his body, Chu-Mu immediately felt a strange aura. It was cold and hot at the same time, but also seemed to be alternating between cold and hot. There was also a numbing feeling. Under the guidance of the cultivation method, the numbing feeling spread throughout his body. Suddenly, his muscles felt a sense of tension. Gradually, it was as if the power of his physique was about to be condensed, like a hemp rope being twisted together. Chu-Mu wasn't distracted in the slightest. He knew that this was the first time he practiced a body refining technique. Although his body was strong, he had never practiced a proper body refining technique before. Therefore, there was a sense of disunity. Now that he was starting to practice a true body refining technique, he was gathering the strength of his body that was like a plate of loose sand into a single force. The stronger the cultivation method, the more obvious this process would be. And the stronger the physique at the beginning, the more obvious the effect would be. All the muscles and bones in his body suddenly felt as if they were being tied up. Creaking sounds could be heard. It was as if it was very uncomfortable, but also as if it was very enjoyable. This strange contradictory feeling made Chu-Mu feel like he was going crazy. Fortunately, his willpower was firm and he wasn't disturbed. Otherwise, all his previous efforts would have been wasted. The first time he cultivated a cultivation method, he had to successfully condense the power of his disunity. This was a very important process that couldn't be interrupted. Otherwise, all his previous efforts would be wasted. The next time he wanted to cultivate it, the difficulty would be even greater, and the effect would be even worse. For the sake of a better cultivation method, no matter what, Chu-Mu had to persevere. As he continued to cultivate, the power of the stars was constantly being absorbed by his body. The power of his physique was like a python that condensed and swam through his body. Under the treasured robe, every muscle on Chu-Mu's body expanded and contracted. It was as if there really were pythons swimming through his muscles. Chu-Mu's body, which wasn't very strong to begin with, seemed to have shrunk even more, becoming a little skinny. The power of the stars constantly converged and fused into Chu-Mu's body. It constantly integrated the power of his physique and condensed it. All the bones in his body began to crackle. At first, it was relatively slow, only once every few breaths. But as time passed, it became faster and faster, and the frequency became higher and higher. Gradually, it was as if countless sounds were connected together. Within the crackling sounds, Chu Mu's body trembled uncontrollably. He felt as if all the bones and muscles in his body were trembling, as if they were about to explode. A tyrannical power swam through his muscles. Everywhere it passed, his muscles would swell to the point of bursting. His body temperature was also rapidly rising. His blood was boiling, and steam was rising from his body, curling up into a white cloud above his head. More and more power of the stars converged, and the fluctuations became increasingly intense. It even seeped out of the room, allowing people passing by to feel it. What is Chu Mu cultivating? The power of the stars is actually so intense. Shangguan Hua, who had come to look for Chu Mu, stopped in front of the door and wondered. Then he turned and left. Since he knew that Chu Mu was cultivating, he knew that the power of the stars was so intense that it wouldn't end in a short period of time. And since the door was closed, no one would barge in, so he didn't need to worry about being disturbed. Chu Mu didn't know that someone had come to look for him while he was cultivating. He was completely immersed in his cultivation and didn't know what was happening in the outside world. The massive star-level battleship sailed through the vast starry skies. With its length of 10,000 meters, it would definitely be a colossus in the primeval era. But in the vast starry skies, it was just a drop in the ocean. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, unknowingly, 5 days passed. It was also the 5th day since Chu Mu started cultivating the first stage of the star calamity cultivation method. The white cloud above Chu Mu's head dissipated and his body temperature returned to normal. His blood was no longer berserk and his heartbeat returned to normal. He looked as if everything was normal. The power of the stars hovering around him also began to weaken, indicating that Chu Mu's cultivation was about to come to an end. After another 15 minutes, Chu Mu's mouth slightly opened. Suddenly, the sound of wind and thunder roared. A white and turbid aura spurted out from his lightly opened lips. It was like a sharp sword that cut through the air, piercing through the void and shattering the wall in front of him. The walls of a star-level battleship were incomparably hard. Even if the 9-star sword of Gojoseon attacked with all his strength, he still wouldn't be able to damage it. Thus, the price of a star-level battleship was extremely shocking. It was countless times more expensive than a meteor-level battleship. Only major powers could afford it. Almost no one could afford it. The aura dissipated and he opened his eyes. In that instant, it seemed as if there were stars swirling in his eyes. His pupils seemed to transform into the vast, starry skies, unfathomable. It only lasted for an instant before disappearing. Chu Mu's lips curled into a faint smile, a smile that came from the bottom of his heart. Chapter 11:27. The boundless starry sky was dark and mysterious. A cold aura was everywhere. Countless habitable planets were shining with the brilliance of stars. A 10,000-meter-long starship was moving at a high speed, emitting a deep and cold aura. It seemed that the journey was endless. This starship was called the Sword Edge Starship. At this moment, in the 8th Battle Team's district, 33 members were gathered. 31 of them were surrounding the starship. In the middle, there were 2 people fighting. The sword light was spinning, and the demonic sound was shattering the sky. When the sword was struck out, the sound waves would strike. The demonic sound could pierce through the brain, metal, and stone. It was terrifying. Even the 7-star sword of Gojoseon standing far away felt their scalps go numb. Lin Kai's demonic sound sword technique has broken through to a new level. Yeah, he actually grasped the essence of the demonic sound sword technique. The power of his sword technique has obviously increased. The demonic sound sword technique was executed one move after another. Each move was stronger than the previous one. After his battle with Chu Mu, he had trained hard for many days. After carefully comprehending it, he finally comprehended the essence of the demonic sound sword technique and grasped it. The power of his sword technique had greatly increased. Lin Kai's opponent was Chu Mu. Deshang had grasped the essence of the demonic sound sword technique. With the increase in power, Lin Kai felt that he should be able to defeat Chu Mu quickly. He estimated that he would be able to defeat him within 10 moves. This was because it had only been half a month since the last time they fought. Chu Mu's strength shouldn't have increased by much. Unexpectedly, it had already been 20 moves, but he still hadn't defeated Chu Mu. Moreover, he hadn't even suppressed Chu Mu into a disadvantageous position. Chu Mu was able to contend with him with ease. Every time their swords clashed, he could feel an even more powerful force hitting his sword. In other words, in this half a month, not only had his strength increased, Chu Mu's strength had also increased by quite a bit. The extent of the increase was not the slightest bit below his own, and even surpassed his own. Hua Yi, one of the vice-captains, stared at Chu Mu with a look of disbelief. In just half a month, the strength of this 4-star sword of Gojoseon had increased significantly. Not only him, but the others could also see it. How is Chu Mu cultivating? It has only been half a month, and he has become stronger again. If he continues to improve at this rate, how is he going to survive? An 8-star sword of Gojoseon cried out. The most ridiculous thing is that he's only a 4-star sword of Gojoseon. His cultivation hasn't improved in the slightest. Another 8-star sword of Gojoseon spoke with a look of shock on his face. Indeed, in just half a month, Chu Mu's cultivation had not improved at all. Of course, in terms of the quantity of the Divine Wilderness Sword essence, there was an increase, but it didn't help much in terms of power. It only lasted a little longer. Chu Mu's swordsmanship was the Gale Quick Sword, the 32 Thunderstorm Swords, and the Autumn Water Eternal Sky swordsmanship. After Deshang had mastered the essence of the swordsmanship, he was able to unleash power that exceeded his original limit. In addition, Chu Mu had mastered the essence of the swordsmanship, which made the swordsmanship more flexible. Therefore, under Chu Mu's sword, the Gale Quick Sword, which was only a low-tier human-class sword art, was able to unleash power that exceeded the mid-tier human-class sword art and was close to the high-tier human-class sword art. As for the peak-tier human-class 32 Thunderstorm Swords, when used, its power was even stronger than that of a low-tier human-class sword art. Under the alternating use of the 3 sword arts, he was able to contend with Lin Kai's high-tier human-class demonic sound sword art, which he had mastered. Chu Mu's powerful physique was one of Chu Mu's biggest advantages. It was an advantage that Lin Kai didn't have. Chu Mu used inch step to fight with Lin Kai in close combat. While circling around him, he was able to advance and retreat as he wished. An even stronger physique allowed him to use inch step even more freely, and his explosive power was even stronger. Moreover, his physique, which had been trained by an orthodox body refining technique, was able to combine his strength into one. Not only was it easier to unleash his full power, his recovery speed was also faster, and his endurance was also stronger. The mid-tier 5-phase sword slashed out. Wind and thunder surged and roared, as if they wanted to destroy everything under the sword. It was extremely terrifying. At the same time that Lin Kai dodged, the Devil Sound Sword Technique's 7th move was cast. The terrifying Devil Sound shattered the air as it arrived. Spatial ripples wreaked havoc as they spread, causing Chu Mu's heart to violently beat. A sense of danger exploded forth, and he hastily burst forth with power to use inch step to circle around Lin Kai and counterattack. The last time he performed this movement, he was a bit exhausted, but this time Chu Mu still felt a strong power surging in his body. All of this was thanks to the training of the first stage of the Star Calamity martial art. Although there was still a long way to go, Chu Mu's physique had obviously improved. Fight, fight, fight. A terrifying sense of crisis made Lin Kai's face change drastically. He didn't have time to turn around, so he borrowed the momentum of the sword slash to rush forward. The demonic sound circled around his body, forming an invisible layer of defense, blocking Chu Mu's sword. The sword momentum was slightly blocked, but the power exploded in an instant, shattering the demonic sound. But by a hair's breadth, Lin Kai had already rushed out of the range of Chu Mu's sword momentum. The tip of his foot touched the ground and he spun around. Using the tip of his foot as the axis, he slashed out with his sword. In an instant, a demonic sound sword light broke through the air and blasted towards Chu Mu. Like a ghost's howl, the demonic sound pierced through one's brain, causing one to feel dizzy. Chu Mu wasn't affected in the slightest. He forcibly shattered the demonic sound sword light with a single slash of his sword and executed the inch step. In just a few steps, his figure flickered, leaving behind several afterimages of different postures as he closed in on Lin Kai. It was extremely exciting, causing everyone to be unable to take their eyes off of it. Even the 9-star sword of Gojoseon were mesmerized by it. This kind of battle technique was extremely exquisite and well practiced, as expected of the best recruit medal winner. His potential is incomparably shocking. A 9-star sword of Gojoseon secretly exclaimed. Chu Mu's performance could be said to be stunning. No one looked down on him. In a blink of an eye, 30 moves had passed, but the battle was still ongoing. With the protection of the divine desolate sword energy, the middle-grade 5-phase sword was not damaged. Once again, the swords clashed. Both sides slid back, just like the previous time. But this time, Chu Mu slid back 3 meters, and Lin Kai also slid back 3 meters. They were evenly matched. Again. With a loud roar, Lin Kai once again leaped forward. His body transformed into a demonic sound, as if he was one with his sword. A powerful sword slashed towards Chu Mu. Wherever Lin Kai passed, the air would be split open like a vacuum. The surrounding air would surge violently, increasing Lin Kai's power. The whistling of the air and the demonic sound of the sword overlapped, causing the power of the sword to increase once again, surpassing the limit. Chu Mu's expression was grave. This was an absolutely powerful attack. The others, on the other hand, revealed excited expressions. They could see that this was Lin Kai's most powerful attack. This attack would either result in victory or defeat. Taking a deep breath, his chest heaved up and down. Bursts of thunder rang out from his body. The tyrannical physical strength, after twisting together, once again condensed. It rushed up from the soles of his feet, through his waist, and into his right hand. In an instant, the 5-phase sword let out a clear sound. The muscles of his arm vibrated, and the sword body also vibrated at a high frequency. Ever since he created the inch sword, Chu Mu rarely used the earthquake because the consumption of the inch sword was lower than the earthquake. Moreover, the inch sword also had an advantage that the earthquake did not have, which was to burst out the fastest sword speed and the most tyrannical power in the shortest distance. However, the earthquake was still the earthquake. The power it possessed was not something the inch sword could compare with. Once again, he used the earthquake. Especially after cultivating the first level of the star's calamity, the earthquake was even stronger. The 5-phase sword was raised and slashed down. Chu Mu's body did not move at all. In an instant, it gave people a terrifying feeling that even if there was a mountain in front of him, it would still be split open by the sword. It was a terrifying sword. All the power gathered and twisted into one. As the sword fell, the air was split from the middle. Even the vacuum seemed to be split open. A straight white line appeared, which was fierce enough to make people's faces change drastically. What a terrifying sword! Captain Dong Ting's face suddenly changed. He felt the terrifying power contained in Chu Mu's sword. Was this something that a 4-star sword of Gojoseon could perform? A sword pierced through the void. A sword fell down, shattering the vacuum. The two swords collided in an instant. Chu Mu's body trembled. His bones emitted bursts of explosive sounds. His body swayed, and he retreated step by step as if he was drunk. With every step, Chu Mu dissipated some of the force of the collision. He retreated 5 steps in a row before he could stand firm. On the other hand, Lin Kai was sent flying backward at an even faster speed. His face was flushed. He held back a mouthful of blood and swallowed it back. However, there was still a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. In an instant, he flew more than 10 meters away. After landing, he staggered back 3 steps before he could stand firm. His face was pale, and the hand holding the sword was trembling slightly. Chu Mu won. Everyone widened their eyes and looked at each other. This ending was completely unexpected. Chu Mu's hand was also trembling, but it was very subtle. He used a technique to dissipate the force. His tyrannical body allowed him to recover quickly. He was very excited. In the previous battle, he was at a disadvantage. If they fought again, he would only lose to Lin Kai's sword. However, this time, he didn't use any of his trump cards, especially when Lin Kai had mastered the essence of the demonic sound sword art. His strength was stronger, but Lin Kai was suppressed. Although he didn't defeat Lin Kai, it was close. All of this was thanks to the astral calamity body refining technique. This was the first time Chu Mu cultivated the first stage of the astral calamity. His tyrannical body directly rose from the level of a 5-star sword of Gojosian to the level of a 6-star sword of Gojosian. Moreover, after a few casual cultivation, it rose again and reached the peak of the 6-star level. This was a type of potential, the potential of the body. Because Chu Mu hadn't cultivated a true body refining technique before, his several advancements were all coincidences and opportunities. There was an enormous amount of potential hidden in his body, and this cultivation was equivalent to unlocking this potential. Chu Mu estimated that this potential was enough to allow him to reach the level of a 7-star sword of Gojosian in a short time, or even the peak of the 7-star level. At that point, even if his cultivation was only at the 4th layer of Fate Realm, he would be able to contend against an 8-star sword of Gojosian. Chapter 11:28. At the bottom of the huge sword edge, a gate slowly opened. A black starship that was about 100 meters long and shaped like a sword slowly descended. After descending for about 1,000 meters, a stream of air gushed out from its tail like flames. Under the huge propelling force, this 100-meter-long starship drew a perfect arc and flew away from the other side. On the black starship, there was a symbol of 2 crossed swords. In between the 2 swords, there was a symbol, which was 8. This meant that this 100-meter-long starship belonged to the 8th battle team of the Sword Edge. In the starship, there were a total of 35 people. Other than the 32 people who originally belonged to the 8th battle team, the other 3 were new recruit. Chu Mu was one of them. The other 2 were a 7-star sword of Gojosian and an 8-star sword of Gojosian. They belonged to the same batch of recruits as Chu Mu. The reason why they took the 8th battle team's starship away from the Sword Edge was to carry out a mission. The 8th battle team's starship was a specially made super-small planetary-level starship. The power of the main cannon was extremely powerful. It could instantly kill any creation realm sword of Gojosian. Any swordsman below the 7th sky of Nirvana realm would most likely die if they were hit. Although the power of the sub-cannon was not as powerful as the main cannon, it still had the terrifying power to kill anyone below the 4th sky of Nirvana realm. Moreover, the starship's protective shield could withstand a direct attack from a 6th sky of Nirvana realm swordsman. Even if the protective shield was broken, the starship's shell could still withstand a direct attack from a Nirvana realm swordsman. The 8th battle team's starship was 100 meters long, 30 meters wide, and 30 meters tall. It was divided into 3 levels. The first level was the cockpit, the second level was the residential area, and the last level was the training area. At this moment, other than a few members who were responsible for piloting the starship, the others were training in the training area. The content of the training was to cooperate and execute the battle formation. The perfect circle battle formation was the battle formation that the recruits learned. It was also the simplest battle formation and could be considered as the foundation of battle formations. After mastering the perfect circle battle formation, it would be easier to learn other battle formations. The battle formation that they were currently training in was the sword light battle formation that belonged to the sword edge judgment army. The sword light battle formation was different from the perfect circle battle formation. It was a kind of battle formation with shocking sharpness. It focused on offense, using offense as defense. The minimum number of people required for a sword light battle formation was 3, and there was no maximum number. In theory, it could be formed by thousands, tens of thousands, or even more. However, the more people there were in a battle formation, the more difficult it was to construct, the harder it was to control, and the harder it was to unleash its power. Furthermore, the number of people in a sword light battle formation had to be a multiple of 3. You 3 form a formation. You 3 form a formation. Fight, Dongting said. Chu Mu and the other 2 Sword of Gojoseon formed a sword light battle formation, while the other 3 also formed a sword light battle formation to resist. Anyone in the sword light battle formation could become the main attacking force, and they could switch positions at will. While the starship of the 8th Squad was moving at 5,000 times the speed of sound, the members of the squad were getting more and more familiar with the application of sword auras. In fact, Chu Mu and the other 2 new members were the most important. The other old members had already grasped it. The destination of the 8th Squad's starship was planet Aquamarine. As the starship entered the atmosphere of planet Aquamarine, countless sparks flew due to the friction. As soon as it landed, it was immediately stored in the space ring of the captain, Dong Ting. As a peak 9-star Sword of Gojoseon, his telepathic thoughts were strong enough to store the starship in his space ring. There were a total of 35 people, and they left in 3 groups. It was not rare for swordsmen to leave in groups like this. Therefore, it did not attract much attention. The 3 groups of people were led by the captain, Dong Ting, and the 2 vice-captains. Chu Mu was led by Shang Guanhua. In addition, there were 2 9-star Sword of Gojoseon, 5 8-star Sword of Gojoseon, and 2 7-star Sword of Gojoseon. Lin Kai was also in this group. Chu Mu, if you encounter any danger later, don't panic. Lin Kai walked beside Chu Mu and said softly. Although he knew that Chu Mu's strength was not inferior to his at all, and he might even be stronger than him, this was his first mission after all. Moreover, his opponents were extremely ferocious galactic pirates. I know, Chu Mu said. Although this was his first mission, Chu Mu had experienced many dangers before this. This time, according to the information provided by the Wind Division, there were suspected to be 3 strongholds of the Black Jail pirate gang on planet Aquamarine. They were scattered in different cities and were very secretive. The Wind Division had spent more than a year to find out. The Black Jail pirate gang was a powerful galactic pirate gang. In fact, they had appeared hundreds of years ago. They had a deep foundation and many experts. They had been wiped out by the Sword Edge Judgment Army once. However, the leader of the Black Jail pirate gang was very cunning and was not killed. He even took away a group of core members and rebuilt the Black Jail pirate gang. After being wiped out once, the Black Jail pirate gang was even more secretive and unpredictable. Therefore, even after a few decades, the headquarters of the Black Jail pirate gang had not been found. It was also due to luck that they were able to find the stronghold of the Black Jail pirate gang this time. When Chu Mu heard about the Black Jail pirate gang, he thought about it. This was because, in the immemorial world, there was an organization called Black Jail. He did not know if it was related to the Black Jail pirate gang. Chu Mu didn't say this because he himself wasn't sure. 3 strongholds, 2 were fake and 1 was real. The 8th battle team was divided into 3 teams. One of the teams would definitely encounter the real Black Jail pirate gang and face them. Moreover, the distance between the 3 strongholds was very far. They would not be able to reinforce the other party, and could only rely on themselves. A few days later, everyone stopped in front of an ordinary-looking restaurant. They looked at each other, exchanged glances and nodded slightly. The 11 of them walked into the restaurant one after another. As soon as they walked into the restaurant, a waiter came up to greet them warmly. The 11 of them did not wear any uniform. Therefore, they did not attract much attention. After they sat around a big table, they discussed with each other while eating. According to the information from the Wind Department, if this is really the stronghold of the Black Jail pirate gang, it should be underground. Shangguanhua said to everyone. We can't be sure if this restaurant is the stronghold of the Black Jail pirate gang. Otherwise, we can act directly. An 8-star sword of Gojoseon said. They were an army and not a pirate gang. Naturally, they could not act directly without being sure. Find a chance to sneak into the restaurant. Shangguanhua said. Leave this to me. An 8-star sword of Gojoseon said. His name was Suing. He was very good at hiding. Among everyone, if he said he was the second best, no one would dare to say they were the best. Be careful. Shangguanhua said. Suing nodded, got up, walked over casually and talked with the waiter. Not long after, he went to the back. Chu Mu and the rest of the 10 were waiting for news. Almost every member of the 8th battle team had their own specialties. Some were good at piloting starships, some were good at analyzing information, some were good at scouting and so on. However, most of them were good at fighting. Suddenly, Shangguanhua seemed to have thought of something. She glanced at Chu Mu and a long sword with a sheath appeared in her hand. The sheath was green in color and covered with purple patterns. Vaguely, there were traces of wind and lightning dual elemental energy waves spreading out. Wind and lightning sword. A member stared at the sword and then at Shangguanhua. He did not understand. Vice Captain, what are you doing with this sword? Chu Mu, this sword is for you. Shangguanhua said and handed the sword to Chu Mu. Chu Mu was stunned when he heard this. The others were also stunned. The 2 sword techniques you used are related to the power of wind and lightning. With this wind and lightning sword, the power of those 2 sword techniques can be improved again. Shangguanhua said. Only then did the others understand. Thinking back, Chu Mu did use 2 sword techniques related to the power of wind and lightning. But Chu Mu's sword, if I'm not wrong, is a mid-grade 5-phase sacred sword. It's also very good. A 9-star sword of Gojoseon said. Chu Mu is a disciple of the 5 elements sword sect. Only by using the 5-phase sacred sword can he better exert the power of the 5 elements sword sect's sword technique. With the 5-phase sacred sword in one hand and the wind and lightning sword in the other, his strength will be stronger. Shangguanhua said and put the wind and lightning sword in Chu Mu's hand. Dual sword technique? Everyone was surprised. I remember. Previously in the sword battle area, Chu Mu used the ancient rhythm sword puppet. It's a sword puppet that can use dual swords. At that time, Chu Mu used dual swords to fight with Vice Captain Shangguan. Everyone was even more surprised when they heard this. Good boy, it turns out that you didn't use your true strength when you fought with me last time. Lin Kai patted Chu Mu's shoulder and said with a grimace. Since she had already said this much, in helplessness, Chu Mu could only put away the wind-lightning sword that Shangguanhua had given him. Originally, if he were to use 2 swords, aside from the middle-rank 5-phase sword, he would also have the undying sacred sword. However, this wind-lightning sword was also a middle-rank sacred sword. It amplified the power of wind and lightning, increasing the power of violent wind fast sword and wind-lightning 32 sword. It was pretty good. No, after we go back, you have to use dual swords to fight with me. Lin Kai said again. He was also a battle maniac. Come on, you can't even defeat Chu Mu with a single sword. If you use dual swords, you won't be able to defeat him. Another 7-star sword of Gojoseon teased me. After we go back, I'll fight with Chu Mu. An 8-star sword of Gojoseon said. Okay. Chu Mu didn't hesitate. He already knew the strength of a 7-star sword of Gojosian, but he didn't know the strength of an 8-star sword of Gojosian. It would be best if he could fight with an 8-star sword of Gojosian. The topic revolved around Chu Mu, and they talked and laughed. "Tell me honestly, boy. How many tricks are you hiding?" Lin Kai said to Chu Mu. "No." Chu Mu had an honest look on his face. "I'd be a fool to believe you," Lin Kai said. They talked and laughed as if they weren't here to carry out a mission. They were like ordinary guests. Not long after, Suing came back. As soon as she sat down, she didn't rush to announce the result. Instead, she interjected and laughed. After making sure that she didn't attract any attention, she used a secret language to explain the result of the investigation. Chapter 11:29. Inside the restaurant, Suing told everyone what he had found out. Everyone was overjoyed. This restaurant was the real base of the Black Prison Pirates on planet Aquamarine. The other 2 bases must be fake. They booked a few rooms and stayed in this restaurant for the time being. After entering the rooms, Shangguan Hua took out the jade talisman that the Sword Edge Judgment Army used to communicate with each other. After activating the seal, she sent the message out. After some time, the other 2 teams would receive the message and rush over. No one slept. Everyone was resting and waiting for the night to come. Although the sword of Gojosian could see in the dark as if it was daytime, the night always gave people a sense of relaxation. It was the best time to rest and also the best time for secret operations. Late at night there was no starlight. Shangguan Hua's group of 11 people left their rooms and used stealth techniques to erase their traces. They moved forward silently, led by Suing. As the base of the Black Prison Pirates, theoretically, it should be heavily guarded. However, there were no guards here because they were worried about attracting unnecessary attention. After all, it was a restaurant. There were many people coming and going. If they were not careful and attracted attention, it could lead to bad consequences. This was one of the lessons learned when the Black Prison Pirates were wiped out last time. Although there were no heavy guards, the entrance was located in a very secret place. If it were not for Su Ying's unique skills in this aspect, it would have been impossible for anyone else to find it. An 8-star sword of Gojosian walked to the entrance. After observing for a while, he started to crack the mechanism. His name was Yun Haitian, and he was best at mechanisms. When Yun Haitian was cracking the mechanism, a few people looked in other directions and observed carefully to see if anyone was approaching. It seemed that the people in the restaurant did not know that they had been exposed. Therefore, they did not take any precautions. The entrance opened and everyone entered silently. 3 9-star sword of Gojosian used the Nianji ripple technique to search for any movement inside the entrance to avoid being discovered. Out of the 11 people, 2 of them stayed outside the entrance to provide support. They were the 2 8-star sword of Gojosian. The others all entered and closed the entrance. 9 people could form 3 small sword light battle formations, and 3 small sword light battle formations could form a larger sword light battle formation. The 9 people who entered the entrance were arranged according to the position of the sword light battle formation. They could form a sword light battle formation anytime. The passageway at the entrance was a flight of stairs that led downwards continuously. The lighting was dim and it seemed somewhat deep. Gradually, Chu Mu's group of 9 heard some voices. "Who are you?" Suddenly, a scream full of shock rang out. Turned out that a person just happened to walk out from behind a door and ran right into Chu Mu and the other 9 people. "Kill!" Shangguan Hua's voice was cold and filled with killing intent. Their mission was to clear out the strongholds in this area. If possible, they would capture 1 or 2 of them alive, bring them back and hand them over to the Wind Division to force them to reveal the location of the other strongholds of Black Jail and their lair. Everything was done with the first mission as the main objective. The other missions were just side missions. Under the sudden outburst, the black-robed person was shocked and quickly retreated. However, it was too late. Shangguan Hua's thin sword turned into starlight and shot out. The sword aura streaked across the sky and instantly pierced through the black-robed person's head, killing him instantly. Chu Mu saw the other party's outfit clearly. It was indeed the same as the black jail people that he encountered in the immemorial world. As Shangguan Hua drew her sword, her aura spread out and alerted the other black jail pirates. When Shangguan Hua's group of 9 charged in, they were surrounded. According to the information provided by the Wind Division, in the stronghold of black jail pirates on planet Aquamarine, the highest cultivation was at the peak of 9th heaven of Fate Realm. There were around 80 to 100 of them. In theory, there were only 9 people from the Sword Edge Judgment Army who charged in, but there were 10 times the number of enemies. However, one point could not be ignored. Every member of the Sword Edge Judgment Army, especially every member of the Combat Division, were the elites of the elite. Each of them was extremely powerful. It was not difficult for them to challenge an ordinary sword of Gojosian who was 1 star level above them. As for the Black Jail Pirates, although they were notorious and had a large number of members, most of them were just ordinary people. There might be close to 100 Black Jail Pirates in this stronghold. However, more than half of them were low-level Sword of Gojosian, less than half were mid-level Sword of Gojosian, and less than 20 high-level Sword of Gojosian. As soon as the battle started, the low-level and mid-level Sword of Gojosian were completely reduced to cannon fodder. 1, 2, 3 of them were killed continuously. Shangguan Hua and the other 8 formed a sword-light battle formation. They used offense as defense, and their sharpness was unstoppable. Everywhere they passed, they killed everything in their path without even a single exchange of blows. The sword-light battle formation formed by the 9 of them was like a horrifying meat grinder. It killed all the enemies and blood rained down. Under their swords, the Black Jail Pirates were just a bunch of mobs. Of course, since it was a stronghold, there would naturally be more than a bunch of mobs. There were also true experts. Those high-level Sword of Gojosian were the true expert. Every one of them was emitting a terrifying aura. God knows how many souls had died under their swords. "Who are you people?" The leader of the 9-star Sword of Gojosian roared. His whole body was covered by a black robe, and his face could not be seen clearly. Otherwise, his face would have been extremely gloomy. Around them, there were corpses of the Black Jail Pirate. They were a bunch of low-level and mid-level Sword of Gojosian. In the ancient god world, there were many low-level and mid-level Sword of Gojosian. They could not all die. Among the Black Prison Star Pirates, low-level Sword Kings were just small fries, while intermediate-level Sword Kings were slightly better, but they weren't far off unless they had outstanding talent. However, those with outstanding talents would be heavily nurtured and wouldn't be sent to such a place. "The people who will kill you," Shangguan Hua said coldly. As soon as she finished speaking, she attacked again. There was no need for superfluous words. She just wanted to kill. There were a total of 19 Black Jail Pirates left. There were 4 9-star Sword of Gojosian, 6 8-star Sword of Gojosian, and the remaining 9 were 7-star Sword of Gojosian. On Chu Mu's side, there were 3 9-star Sword of Gojosian, 3 8-star Sword of Gojosian, 3 7-star Sword of Gojosian, and 2 8-star Sword of Gojosian guarding outside. Among the 19 Black Jail Pirates, there were some who were trained in battle formations. They set up battle formations and immediately fought against Shangguan Hua and the others. The others assisted from the side. It was hard to tell who had the upper hand at the moment. Shangguan Hua made a prompt decision and gave the order. The 9 sword-light battle formations immediately dispersed into 3 smallest sword-light battle formations. This way, their flexibility was greatly increased. The sword-light battle formation formed by Shangguan Hua's 3 9-star Sword of Gojosian directly stalled the 4 9-star Sword of Gojosian. These 4 9-star Sword of Gojosian also formed a battle formation and actually suppressed Shangguan Hua and the other 2. The sword-light battle formation formed by the 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon also stalled a portion of the 8-star sword of Gojoseon. However, there were a total of 6 8-star sword of Gojoseon on the other side. When they surrounded and attacked, the pressure increased tremendously. For a moment they could only stall, but it was impossible to determine the outcome of the battle. Chu-Mu, Lin Kai and another 7-star sword of Gojoseon formed a sword-light battle formation and fought against the 9 7-star sword of Gojoseon. Although the sword-light battle formation formed by the 3 of them was powerful enough to fight against an 8-star sword of Gojoseon, it was a little lacking when facing against 9 7-star sword of Gojoseon with extraordinary strength. It was gradually suppressed and was at a disadvantage. In the information from the Wind Division, it did not mention that the Black Jail pirates in this stronghold had mastered battle formations. The difference in strength between mastering battle formations and not mastering battle formations was very obvious. If they did not master battle formations, Shangguan Hua and the others would definitely win this battle. However, the other party had mastered battle formations and the outcome was unpredictable. Fortunately, Shangguan Hua and the others were the elites of the elite. Each of them had strong willpower and tenacity. They were able to withstand such pressure. Moreover, they had encountered similar situations in the past when they were carrying out missions. Naturally, they had a way to deal with it. Godly armor, Shangguan Hua murmured. Suddenly, a powerful force surged from his body. Immediately, a black iron armor made up of a helmet, body armor, arm armor, and leg armor appeared on Shangguan Hua's body. It fit his body perfectly, as if it had been tailor-made for him by a master tailor. With the black metal godly armor on his body, Shangguan Hua's aura became deep and cold. It was even more violent. The protective sword essence was strengthened by more than 10 times in an instant. With the godly armor, Shangguan Hua's strength increased tremendously. The power of the sword-light battle formation also increased tremendously. It was originally suppressed, but now it was suppressing the other party. Do you think you are the only one with godly armor? With a cold shout, just as Shangguan Hua and the others were about to destroy the Black Jail Pirates' battle formation, a strong aura surged from the leading Black Jail pirate. A black metal armor appeared on his body, and he wore it as though it was tailor-made for him. Godly armor! Shangguan Hua and the others were shocked. If the other party didn't have the battle formation in their report, it was considered an accident. However, it was a normal accident that could be controlled. However, having a godly armor was a huge accident. Godly armor was a powerful weapon that only the Heavenly Sword Hall had. Once it was refined and equipped, one's strength would increase tremendously. However, godly armor wasn't easy to obtain. In the entire 8th battle team, only the captain and 2 vice-captains had the lowest level black metal godly armor. A Black Jail pirate actually had a godly armor. With the godly armor, his strength would increase tremendously. Immediately, the disadvantage that Shangguan Hua and the other 2 had gained was reversed again. Gradually, they were at a disadvantage. At this point, the situation had become very bad. It was beyond their expectations and control. Even the intelligence personnel of the Wind Division, who had been investigating for more than a year, didn't know that there was someone in the Black Jail Pirates' stronghold who had a godly armor. Chu-Mu felt all the changes and his heart sank. He knew that things had probably gone beyond his expectations and out of his control. If they were not careful, they could very well die here. It had to be said that this was a great irony. Kill them and tear them into pieces. One of the Black Jail pirates sneered. Recalling the situation in his mind, Chu-Mu knew that someone had to quickly kill the opponent and win. Only then would they be able to complete the mission. Chapter 1130. Shangguan Hua and the other 2 were being suppressed. The 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon were on par with the other party. Chu-Mu and the other 2 were also being suppressed by the 9 7-star sword of Gojoseon. The situation was critical and there was no time to waste. Chu Mu made a prompt decision and unleashed his strength. An incomparably tyrannical power surged within his body and was released from every single muscle. Everyone could vaguely hear the roar of thunder. It was the sound of his blood and qi surging and his bones exploding. Clenching his left hand, the wind and lightning sword appeared. With both swords in his hands, the strength of his physique was completely unleashed. Chu Mu's combat strength instantly increased by 1 star. Other than himself, no one knew that his physique had broken through to a new level. 7-star Sword of Gojoseon. In other words, without using the sword energy, Chu Mu could go against the 7-star Sword of Gojoseon and even defeat him. In that instant, not only did the strength of his physique explode, the divine wilderness sword energy also exploded. Following that, a pale silver luster flowed across the sword. The terrifying sharpness made the 7-star Sword of Gojoseon tremble uncontrollably. Level 2 Sword Force. A sword, an extremely powerful sword, seemed to have cut open the void and left a pale silver sword mark. Facing this sword, the 7-star Sword of Gojoseon's expression changed. He wanted to dodge but realized that his body was out of his control. He was trembling, his blood seemed to have frozen and his muscles were numb. Unable to dodge or resist, he could only widen his eyes in fear. Under Chu Mu's sword, his head was chopped off and he died instantly. As if he had the help of God, he killed in all directions. Thanks to the sword aura battle formation, his sharpness was greater than others. Using both swords and 2 sword techniques, the 7-star Sword of Gojoseon of the Black Prison Star Pirates were no match for him. Before anyone could react to Chu Mu's sudden burst of strength, his sword had already killed 4 7-star Sword of Gojoseon. Secret technique. The rest of the Black Prison Galactic Pirates were shocked as they roared. One by one, they used their secret techniques to increase their strength. Shang Guanhua and the rest saw the hope of winning and quickly used their secret techniques as well. Without hesitation, Chu Mu also used the Burning Blood transformation. His blood essence collided and burned. An even more tyrannical strength appeared, filling his entire body. The Wind and Thunder swords and the 5 phases swords both began to emit pale red blood flames. Other than his top High God Realm sword intent and law force, Chu Mu went all out. Kill, kill, kill. Even the Black Prison Galactic Pirates, who had used their secret techniques, were no match for Chu Mu's sword. The remaining 4 7-stars Sword of Gojoseon had all died under Chu Mu's sword. After dealing with his opponent, Chu Mu immediately charged towards the 6 8-star Sword of Gojoseon and engaged in an intense battle. The current Chu Mu had the strength to contend with and even defeat an 8-star Sword of Gojoseon. In an instant, the pressure on his companions was greatly reduced. In an instant, he erupted with power and broke the opponent's battle formation. The moment the battle formation was broken, its power was greatly reduced. Then, Chu Mu and the rest separated them, unable to form a battle formation again. Chu Mu and the other 2 formed a battle formation. With Chu Mu as the leader, he stalled the 3 8-star Sword of Gojoseon. The other 3 8-star Sword of Gojoseon of the 8th battle team unleashed their invincible might, killing one of the 8-star Sword of Gojoseon in a split second. The situation was reversed in an instant. Shangguanhua and the other 2 gathered their strength and fought fiercely against the 4 9-star Sword of Gojoseon. On the other hand, the 4 9-star Sword of Gojoseon also felt that the situation was not good. They all fought with their lives on the line, wanting to kill Shangguanhua and the other 2. The 32 Swords of Wind and Thunder, Long Autumn Water. Both moves were executed at the same time. Moreover, both moves were infused with level 2 sword energy, causing the power of the Sword of Gojoseon to increase by 3 times. It was even more tyrannical. It severed the arm of an 8-star Sword of Gojoseon and pierced the shoulder of another 8-star Sword of Gojoseon. In just one exchange, Chu Mu injured 2 8-star sword of Gojoseon, causing their strength to decrease. In an instant, the battle formation changed. The power of the battle formation surged towards Lin Kai. The 7th move of the demonic sound sword art, demonic sound shattering space. The terrifying sound wave caused the 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon's expression to change drastically. They hurriedly retreated. The sword light battle formation changed again. The other 7-star sword of Gojoseon attacked with all his might and killed the 8-star sword of Gojoseon, who lost an arm. It was Chu Mu's turn again. His 2 swords exploded again. He killed the injured 8-star sword of Gojoseon with 1 strike and injured the 3rd 8-star sword of Gojoseon with the other. The sword light battle formation was like a meat grinder. As it rotated, it attacked continuously. The 8-star sword of Gojoseon was killed in just 2 to 3 moves. Without any rest, he immediately attacked the other 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon. With the cooperation of Chu Mu and the other 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon's sword light battle formation, the 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon were also killed one by one. Without any hesitation, the 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon formed the sword light battle formation and attacked the 4 9-star sword of Gojoseon of the Black Prison Space Pirate. They helped Shangguanhua and the other 2 take some of the pressure off. "Let's go too," Lin Kai said. "No." Chu Mu quickly stopped Lin Kai. "Our strength is not enough to fight against a 9-star sword of Gojoseon." Lin Kai also stopped. Chu Mu was right. Although they could kill an 8-star sword of Gojoseon with their strength, they were not strong enough to fight a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. The reason why they rushed forward was only because they had killed a few 8-star sword of Gojoseon. If they really rushed forward, they might be killed by a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. Now, with the 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon forming the sword light battle formation, they helped Shangguanhua and the other 2 take some of the pressure off. The situation was gradually turning around. Chu Mu stopped the burning blood transformation and took out some elixirs. Although the effect was not as good as the golden vein blood yang elixir, it was similar to the blood yang elixir. It slowly recovered the blood essence that was consumed. Lin Kai, the 7-star sword of Gojoseon, and Chu Mu stood at a distance and watched the battle formation. The 4 9-star sword of Gojoseon of the Black Prison Space Pirates were flustered and exasperated. The current situation was not good for them. "Hang in there and find a chance to escape," the 9-star sword of Gojoseon wearing a god armor said. They were strong and their battle formation was even stronger. For a moment they were on par with each other. "Damn it, if only we could help." Lin Kai clenched his fist and said angrily. Now that both sides were on par, if one side received reinforcements, they would be able to suppress the other. Chu Mu's eyes flashed and he kept the wind and lightning sword. Immediately after, 3 middle-grade sacred swords appeared in his hand. He threw them into the air and his left hand formed a sword finger. With a silent chant, the 3 ordinary middle-grade sacred swords immediately flew towards one of the 9-star sword of Gojoseon. Flying Heaven Imperial Sword Technique. If it was any other time, even if Chu Mu used the Flying Heaven Imperial Sword Technique with all his strength, he would not be able to do anything to a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. But in this situation, any external force would affect the balance. The sharpness of the middle-grade sacred swords was infused with the divine wilderness sword essence, inextinguishable sword intent, and the power of laws. It was enough to easily pierce through the 9-star sword of Gojoseon's protective sword aura. If they were not careful, they could even kill the 9-star sword of Gojoseon. The 9-star sword of Gojoseon that was locked onto by the 3 middle-grade sacred swords was the weakest of the 4. His expression changed drastically as he quickly slashed at the 3 middle-grade sacred swords. But under the control of Chu Mu, the 3 middle-grade sacred swords moved nimbly, dodging the opponent's slash and slashing down from 3 different directions. The 9-star sword of Gojoseon immediately used a sword technique. It was continuous like a surging river. It was as if the power of the river had entangled the 3 sacred swords, causing them to sink into a quagmire. Good chance. The eyes of the 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon lit up. They took the risk and cut into the battle, attacking the 9-star sword of Gojoseon. Under the coordination of Chumu's Flying Heaven defensive sword technique, it immediately increased the pressure on the opponent. Shangguanhua and the other 2 immediately seized the opportunity and disintegrated the opponent's battle formation in an instant. This was the difference between elites and non-elite. Shangguanhua and the rest were not only strong and talented, they had also undergone heavy training. The opponent's talent was not bad, and they were not weak either. They had also grasped battle formations, but in terms of usage and timing of battle, they were not as good as Shangguanhua and the rest. Let's go. The moment the battle formation was disintegrated, the Black Prison Star Pirate immediately shouted and broke away, intending to escape. Shangguanhua's reaction was extremely fast. She also broke away from the battle formation and intercepted the Black Prison Star Pirate. In the 3-on-3 battle, the 4th Black Prison Star Pirate, the 9-star sword of Gojoseon, was entangled by Chumu's Flying Heaven defensive sword technique and the sword light battle formation formed by the 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon. Chumu took out another 2 low-rank sacred swords and soared into the air. Like a meteor, they flew towards the 9-star Sword King, causing the pressure to increase again. The 9-star Sword King wanted to curse out loud. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't afford to be distracted at this moment. Explode. Chumu lightly spat out a word. His eyes suddenly emitted a shocking cold light. In an instant, a lower sacred sword broke through the 9-star sword of Gojoseon's protective sword aura. When it was blocked, the sword trembled and exploded, turning into countless fragments that covered the 9-star sword of Gojoseon's body. He quickly waved his sword and retreated to block the fragment. The 8-star sword of Gojoseon seized the opportunity and attacked. Under the sword technique, the 9-star sword of Gojoseon was immediately injured. Explode. Chumu used the technique for the second time. Another lower sacred sword exploded at close range, injuring the 9-star sword of Gojoseon again. This also created an opportunity for the 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon. With their cooperation, the 9-star sword of Gojoseon's arm was cut off. The sword swept through the air, and the 9-star sword of Gojoseon's head flew high. After killing the 9-star sword of Gojoseon, the 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon turned around and attacked the other 8-star sword of Gojoseon. Chumu took back the 3 middle sacred swords. Exploding 2 lower sacred swords in a row was a great burden on his divine sense. At this time, his spiritual world was shaking. He had to calm down, or his spiritual world might be injured. The 3 8-star sword of Gojoseon formed a sword-light battle formation, which had the strength of a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. Under the cooperation of the other 9-star sword of Gojoseon, they instantly killed the 9-star sword of Gojoseon and went to support the other one. Chumu's spiritual world also calmed down. Not good, he's going to explode. The second 9-star sword of Gojoseon saw that he couldn't avoid being killed. He was about to explode. Chumu pointed his finger, and 3 middle sacred swords flew out. If the 9-star sword of Gojoseon wanted to explode, he would be hit by the 3 middle sacred swords before he could do so. With Chumu's interference, the 9-star sword of Gojoseon couldn't explode and was easily killed. The group attacked the last 9-star sword of Gojoseon. 2 sword-light battle formations attacked from both sides. Chumu's flying imperial sword technique interfered, preventing the other party from exploding. Damn it! The 9-star sword of Gojoseon was filled with resentment. He couldn't explode, couldn't escape, and couldn't fight with his life on the line. He died in depression. After killing the last Black Prison Star Pirate, everyone heaved a sigh of relief and stopped the secret technique. They were all panting heavily with pale faces. Chapter 11:31. Below the restaurant, in the hall, there were corpses all over the floor. They were all Black Prison Star pirates, close to 100 of them. The 9 members of the 8th Battle Team of the Sword Edge Combat Division sat down cross-legged to recover. After the intense battle, they had used up almost all of their energy. Moreover, they had used the secret technique, which caused the side effect. They were all exhausted. Fortunately, they were prepared. They took elixirs to counter the side effects of using the secret technique. 1 hour later, everyone got up. Except for Chu-Mu, the others had not fully recovered. They only recovered a small part of their strength. They were only left with 40 to 50% of their usual strength. However, it was enough. This was not a place to stay for long. They cleaned up immediately. Chu-Mu also took the opportunity to use the heaven-seizing great technique to plunder the cultivation talent of the Black Prison Star Pirate. He also stripped off the damaged divine equipment of the Black Prison Star Pirate. They went back the way they came and left quickly. After leaving the underground, they met up with the other 2 8-star Sword of Gojosian. They did not discover anything strange. Everyone left stealthily and returned to their rooms. They did not talk in their rooms. Instead, they recovered first to deal with any unexpected situations that might arise. 4 hours later, everyone recovered one after another. The danger of this mission was beyond our expectations, Shangguan Hua said seriously. Everyone gathered together. Shangguan Hua said gravely. Soon after, she let out a sigh of relief and smiled slightly. She looked at Chu-Mu. Fortunately, Chu-Mu erupted in time. Otherwise, not only would we not have been able to complete the mission, we might have even lost our lives inside. When everyone thought about it, they felt a lingering fear. Not only did the other party master the battle formation, but one of them even had divine equipment. That's right. Chu-Mu, we really have to thank you this time. Without Chu-Mu, we would be in trouble. I did not expect Chu-Mu to master sword force in addition to dual sword arts. This is incredible. Everyone talked at once. They all looked at Chu-Mu as if they were looking at a prehistoric monster. The 2 8-star Sword of Gojosian who were on the lookout realized that they seemed to have missed something interesting. They quickly asked about it. Immediately, someone began to narrate vividly, directly reproducing the battle process. It was so vivid that everyone felt as if they were reliving it, exclaiming in surprise. The 2 8-star Sword of Gojosian had a look of pity on their faces as they missed out on an exciting scene. When I fought with you before, I wondered if you had grasped sword force, but I felt that it was impossible because I didn't dare to believe it. I didn't expect you to have really grasped sword force. Shangguan Hua didn't know how to describe the shock in her heart. Thinking back, ever since Chu-Mu joined the 8th Battle Team, he had already shocked them several times. Dual sword technique, sword control technique, sword force. I don't even know what to say about you. Shangguan Hua sighed. During that critical battle, he only knew that Chu-Mu had activated the sword force, but he did not know that it was level 2 sword force. Otherwise, he would be shocked again. There was a difference between level 1 sword power and level 2 sword power. Good boy, so you've been hiding your true strength since the first time we fought, Lin Kai mumbled. Ah Kai, if Chu-Mu didn't hide his true strength, you would have lost the first time. Someone laughed at the side. Everyone laughed as well, but they were still shocked because Chu-Mu had grasped sword force. Even their captain, Dong Ting, had not grasped sword force yet. In the entire combat division, excluding the department head and deputy department head, there were no more than 7 people who had grasped sword force. Chu-Mu's contribution to this mission is the greatest, Shangguan Hua said. The night passed quickly while everyone was talking. The people in the restaurant did not find any clues. The owner of the restaurant was just a low-level Sword of Gojosian, and the waiter was just a God Condensation Realm swordsman. They quickly left and met up with the other 2 teams. Dong Ting took out the 8th Battle Team's starship and everyone boarded it. They quickly left and flew into the starry sky. In the starship, Shangguan Hua explained the process of the mission in detail, which caused waves of surprise and shock again. Chu Mu became the center of attention again. I will ask the department head for credit. Dong Ting looked deeply at Chu Mu and said, Indeed, Chu Mu's contribution to this mission was the greatest. I couldn't have completed the mission alone. Chu Mu said, This was the truth. The mission was completed because all of you worked together. But without you, the mission couldn't have been completed. So, among everyone, your contribution is the greatest. Dong Ting said. Shangguan Hua and the others also thought so and had no objections. As for the others, they did not participate in the battle with the Black Prison Pirates and naturally had no right to speak. The 8th Battle Team's starship flew at full speed. At 5,000 times the speed of sound, they flew into the boundless starry sky. Although the Sharp Sword starship could reach 10,000 times the speed of sound, it would not use such a large amount of power under normal circumstances. Therefore, the 8th Battle Team's starship caught up with the Sharp Sword starship after a while and drove into it. After a period of cultivation, Chu Mu's physique became stronger again. His physique had great potential after accumulating time and time again. The Astral Calamity cultivation technique was the one that continuously developed this potential. He was in a period of rapid improvement. Once his potential was fully developed, it would not be so easy to improve after that. He would need a lot of time to polish it. Once he returned to the Sharp Sword starship, Dong Ting immediately went to the war room of the combat division to meet the department head Yun Feng. He reported the details of the mission and at the same time, handed over half of the spoils. As for the other half, it was divided equally among the members of the 8th Battle Team. As for the damaged god equipment, it naturally had to be handed over and sent back to the Heavenly Sword Hall. I see. The difficulty of the mission has increased by half a level. After hearing the report, Yun Feng looked at the god equipment and immediately said. At the same time, he revealed a smile and looked proud. I knew that Chu Mu is not an ordinary person. As expected, he is starting to show his talent. In fact, Yun Feng was also very shocked. He was shocked that Chu Mu had mastered sword force. Even in the judgment, there were only a small number of Nirvana Realm swordsmen who could master sword force. Now, Chu Mu was only a 4-star sword of Gojoseon, but he had already mastered sword force. When his cultivation reached the Nirvana Realm, his sword force might reach the 3rd or even 4th level. It would be very terrifying. Not long after, Dong Ting returned to the 8th Battle Team's area. Everyone gathered around him. This time, Chu Mu contributed the most and got 30% of the battle merit. As for the remaining 70%, 30% will go to the team led by Shangguan Hua, and 40% will go to our 2 teams. Dong Ting said. No one objected to such a distribution, nor did they have the right to object. Chu Mu got 30% of the battle merits and directly awarded it to his Divine Army Order. Suddenly, the color of Chu Mu's Divine Army Order changed from black iron to bronze. It represented that his Divine Army had been promoted from Black Iron Sergeant to Bronze Sergeant. It required 100 battle merits to promote from Black Iron Sergeant to Bronze Sergeant. It required 1,000 battle merits to promote from Bronze Sergeant to Silver Sergeant. It required 10,000 battle merits to promote from Silver Sergeant to Gold Sergeant. It increased tenfold. It was the easiest to promote from Black Iron Sergeant to Bronze Sergeant. 100 battle merits could be obtained by killing some king-level foreign tribes. However, situations like Chu Mu, who was promoted directly after completing a mission, were relatively rare. The battle merits obtained from this mission were 2,000 points. Chu Mu got 30%, which was 600 points. The remaining 1,400 points were distributed among the other team members. Alright, after completing this mission, we will have some time to rest. Use this time to increase your strength. Dong Ting said, looking at Chu Mu. Chu Mu, your potential is number 1. Your strength is also stronger than the 7-star sword of Gojoseon. If you increase your cultivation, you will become even stronger. However, you must have your own ideas about how to cultivate and increase your strength. I will not give you any advice. Dong Ting knew that true geniuses all had their own paths. If others gave advice, it would just be a distraction. Chu Mu nodded. He also didn't like being disturbed. This mission made Chu Mu realize the importance of being strong. If he was strong enough to contend with the 9-star sword of Gojoseon, then the battle would be easier. It was not impossible to contend with the 9-star sword of Gojoseon. As long as his physique reached the level of 8 stars and his cultivation broke through to the 5th firmament of creation, it would be completely possible for him to contend with the 9-star sword of Gojoseon. Even killing an ordinary 9-star sword of Gojoseon would not be a problem. After everyone returned to their rooms, Chu Mu first sorted out the rewards from this mission. There were some cultivation resources, but they were nothing special. He took a mid-grade origin core and started cultivating. After cultivating the astral calamity, his physique continued to strengthen. His meridians also became more resilient and could withstand the violent impact of the sword origin. This also increased the upper limit of Chu Mu's refinement of origin cores. Before cultivating the astral calamity, he could only refine 5 mid-grade elemental dawn a day, and that was his limit. But now, refining 12 mid-grade elemental dawn was not his limit, and the time it took to refine 12 mid-grade elemental dawn was about the same as refining 5 mid-grade elemental dawn. As a result, Chu Mu's efficiency in cultivating the divine wilderness sword origin had more than doubled. Everyone was cultivating. Other than cultivating the sword origin, there was also the body-tempering sword of Gojoseon. Other than that, there was also the cultivation of the power of laws and sword technique. The people of the Wind Department would still leave the Sword Edge ship to investigate all kinds of information regarding the galactic pirates. After thinking about it, Chu Mu decided to report what he knew to Department Head Yun Feng. "Are you sure?" Department Head Yun Feng asked. "I once fought with the people of Black Prison in the primordial world," Chu Mu said. Their attire was exactly the same as the Black Prison Galactic Pirates when they completed the mission. "Yes, I will tell the Wind Department to send people into the primordial world to investigate," Department Head Yun Feng said. "If the situation is true, I will ask for a reward for you." Chu Mu nodded. If there was nothing else, he took his leave. Chapter 1132. The gigantic sword Vanguard was cruising through the boundless starry sky. Its speed was only 1,000 times the speed of sound. At such a speed, the energy consumption would be greatly reduced. Every once in a while, there would be mini starships that would leave the Sword Vanguard and head to a planet with life to carry out missions. As for those who didn't carry out missions, they would stay in the Sword Vanguard and cultivate diligently. They would try their best to increase their strength and strengthen themselves. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. Chu Mu had been a member of the 8th Battle Team for 3 years. After finishing his cultivation, the rich astral energy fluctuations gradually dissipated. Chu Mu opened his eyes. There seemed to be countless stars rotating in his pupils, emitting a shocking light. His entire body faintly trembled, and his bones and tendons simultaneously rang out. Bursts of thunderous rumbles rang out from within his body. This was the sound of his bones, the sound of energy surging within his muscles. This represented the terrifying power contained within Chu Mu's body. He clenched his fist. Instantly the air was crushed. It was very shocking. He punched out. The terrifying fist force broke through the air, forming a vacuum fist wave. It blasted towards the wall, echoing. "I broke through again," Chu Mu thought to himself. A hint of joy flashed in his eyes. Since 3 years ago, when he used the privilege of the best recruit medal to exchange for the first level of the astral tribulation physique cultivation technique, Chu Mu had been cultivating whenever he had time. His potential was constantly being developed. In a short period of time, his physique was constantly strengthened. First, it reached the level of a 6-star sword of Gojoseon. Then, it broke through and reached the level of a 7-star sword of Gojoseon. When he reached the peak of a 7-star sword of Gojoseon, his potential was almost exhausted. Chu Mu used half a year's time to break through to the beginner level of an 8-star sword of Gojoseon. At this point, the potential of his physique was exhausted. If he wanted to improve it, he would need to put in a lot of effort. Over the past 2 years, Zhang Xian had been absorbing the power of the stars and assimilating it into his physical body. Thus, his physical body had been growing stronger and stronger. Even so, he had only managed to make a breakthrough to 8-star sword of Gojoseon intermediate stage. Chu Mu felt that if he wanted to reach the advanced stage of the 8-star sword of Gojoseon without any external assistance, it would take him a long time to reach the advanced stage of the 8-star sword of Gojoseon. If he wanted to reach the advanced stage of the 8-star sword of Gojoseon, it would take him at least 10 to 20 years. He stood up and walked out of the cultivation room. Then, he walked out of the room and headed to the sword combat area. The sword puppets in the sword battle area were undoubtedly the best places to practice sword art. There was no need to worry about life and death, and one could display the might of their sword arts to their heart's content without worrying about accidentally killing their opponent. For the past 3 years, Chu Mu had been a frequent visitor to the sword duel district. Every few days, he would come here to fight. Chu Mu is here. There's another exciting battle to watch. As soon as Chu Mu appeared, the hundreds of sword of Gojoseon in the sword duel district immediately exclaimed in surprise. Before this, Chu Mu would come here frequently. Basically, he would come here once every 3 to 5 days to fight. It was very exciting. However, this time, he only appeared after a gap of half a month. Watching Chu Mu's battle techniques and exquisite sword arts could give them inspiration. It was exciting and practical, and fighting with Chu Mu would give them even more inspiration. Of course, other than the members of the 8th Battle Team, Head Yunfeng, and Vice Commander Li Duan, no one else knew that Chu Mu had grasped sword force. Other than Chu Mu himself, no one else knew that he had grasped level 2 sword force. Understanding the essence of sword arts would allow Chu Mu to be more outstanding in any sword arts he practiced. Chu Mu, I will fight with you. Before Chu Mu could choose a sword puppet, someone had already chosen a sword puppet. He stood on the arena and challenged Chu Mu to a battle. Chu Mu did not refuse. As usual, he chose the ancient rhythm sword puppet and entered the arena. He had used the ancient rhythm sword puppet many times and was very familiar with it. It was like his own body. The battle began. Chu Mu performed the 32 Tempest swords. His sword was like wind and thunder, whistling as it attacked his opponent. The opponent had seen Chu Mu fight many times. He knew that although Chu Mu's cultivation was not high and was only at the 5th firmament of creation, his sword arts were very powerful. He could be said to be invincible in the sword vanguard ship. Of course, the heads, vice-heads, and vice-commanders did not fight. Their cultivation was far higher than Chu Mu's, and their seniority was far higher than Chu Mu's. If they fought with Chu Mu on the arena, it would be dishonorable if they won, and embarrassing if they lost. He performed his sword arts and attacked with all his strength. Chu Mu only performed the 32 Tempest swords and defeated his opponent in 10 moves. His opponent was a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. He performed a high-tier Earth Realm sword art that was close to Deshang's. It was very powerful. After defeating his opponent, Chu Mu did not need to say anything. Immediately, a second person controlled a sword puppet and appeared on the arena. Chu Mu did not refuse and only performed the 32 Tempest swords. In 3 years and countless battles, Chu Mu's mastery of the 32 Tempest swords had reached a new level. It was superb. The 32 Tempest swords was no longer the same as before. Chu Mu had modified it many times. He performed it in a way that was most suitable for him, fully displaying the essence of the 32 Tempest swords. Its power was more than twice as powerful as before. The 32 Tempest swords that Chu Mu performed was not weaker than an ordinary mid-tier Earth Realm sword art. His superb sword technique caused everyone to exclaim in admiration. The other battles on the sword fighting stage had all stopped, and they all gathered around Chu Mu to watch his fight. Chu Mu, that kid, is in the limelight again. Lin Kai and the others who had entered the arena saw this and laughed as they strode over. In 3 years, everyone's strength had improved. Some people improved more than others. For example, Lin Kai had reached the peak of the 7-star sword of Gojoseon. The next step was to break through to the 8-star sword of Gojoseon. His sword art had also become more exquisite. However, the gap between him and Chu Mu had increased. In terms of sword art, Chu Mu was better than him. In terms of cultivation, Chu Mu had improved from the 4th heaven of creation to the 5th heaven of creation. He had also improved from a 4-star sword of Gojoseon to a 5-star sword of Gojoseon. In terms of body cultivation, he had improved from a 7-star sword of Gojoseon to an 8-star sword of Gojoseon. In addition to the improvement of his sword art, Chu Mu estimated that he had the strength to contend with a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. He was considered an expert in the 8th battle team. In addition to the improvement of his cultivation, physique, and sword art, his cultivation of laws had also improved. The fire ultimacy had successfully transformed into the law of fire, and the earth ultimacy had also successfully transformed into the law of earth. The environment of the ancient god world was more conducive to cultivation. In addition, the cultivation of the 5 elements sword techniques had a miraculous effect on the cultivation of the power of the 5 element. Therefore, Chu Mu was able to transform 2 ultimacies into the power of law within 3 years. If he had been in the immemorial world, it would have been very good if he could transform 1 ultimacy. The transformation of the fire ultimacy and the earth ultimacy into the power of law did not directly increase Chu Mu's strength. However, it had broadened his future path. On the battle arena, Chu Mu continued to fight, defeating one opponent after another. After defeating 15 opponents in a row, the energy of the ancient rhythm sword puppet was depleted. Chu Mu also stopped fighting. No one asked Chu Mu to continue, because they all knew that once the energy of the ancient rhythm sword puppet was depleted, Chu Mu would not continue fighting. No one could ask him to continue. After leaving the battle arena, he did not return to his room. Instead, he went to the 8th battle team's area. Chu Mu, let's have a match. As soon as he entered the 8th battle team's area, someone shouted at Chu Mu. The person who invited him was not a member of the 8th battle team, but a 9-star sword of Gojoseon from the 10th battle team. The members of the various battle teams in the combat division basically knew each other. Sometimes it was normal for them to visit other battle teams. The 9-star sword of Gojoseon who had invited him was called Tang Yen. His cultivation was at the middle stage of the 9th heaven of Fortune Realm. His strength was stronger than the average 9-star sword of Gojoseon. Sure. Chu Mu thought about it. He had just made a breakthrough in his body refining cultivation, and his sword origin cultivation had reached the late 5th heaven of Fortune Realm. He had not properly tested the increase in his strength yet. Everyone immediately dispersed and made way for him. Some of them could not help but be a little dazed. They still remembered that 3 years ago, when Chu Mu had just joined the 8th battle team, he had fought against the 7-star sword of Gojoseon, Lin Kai. In the end, he had been at a disadvantage. Now, only 3 years had passed, and Chu Mu's opponent had changed from a 7-star sword of Gojoseon to a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. It was a leap of 2 stars. A 5-star sword of Gojoseon against a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. If word got out, who knew how many people would be scared to death? However, they knew that Chumu was a body-refining sword of Gojoseon. His physique was very strong, and he could make the impossible possible. To be honest, they were a little envious of Chumu. His attainments in body refining were so profound. It should be known that body refining was more difficult than sword origin cultivation. Moreover, not everyone was suitable for body refining. One needed to have enough talent. Coincidentally, Chumu was the kind of person who had outstanding talent in body refining. The battle began. This was the first time that Chumu was facing a 9-star sword of Gojoseon head-on. However, he was not nervous at all. Tang Yen unsheathed his sword, displaying the peak Earth-grade sword art, mountain-shattering sword. With a single sword strike, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. It was extremely terrifying. Chumu's expression was cold. With both swords in his hands, the sword in his left hand displayed the 32 swords of wind and thunder, while the sword in his right hand displayed the autumn water eternal sky sword art. The tyrannical strength of his physique erupted, and he did not dodge at all. He wanted to test if he could face a 9-star sword of Gojoseon head-on with his current strength. The sword strikes collided, and a terrifying shockwave erupted. Chumu instantly closed in on his opponent, using the inch step to engage in close-range combat. I've long heard that you are the most proficient in close-range combat. Let me give it a try today. Tang Yen shouted. The mountain-shattering sword art that he cultivated was also a close-range combat sword art. Proficiency against proficiency. Very soon, Tang Yen discovered that it was a mistake to engage in close-range combat with Chumu. The inch step was extremely fast. Whether it was dodging or advancing, its speed was extremely fast. Moreover, the sword strike that was occasionally unleashed would explode with the greatest power at the shortest distance. It was like a sword strike from the gods, causing Tang Yan's heart to tremble. However, he was the 9-star sword of Gojoseon, who had experienced hundreds of battles. His reaction was fast, and he had grasped the essence of the mountain-shattering sword art. Using his full strength, he engaged in an intense battle with Chumu. For a moment they were evenly matched. Chapter 1133. Tang Yan's 2 swords danced in the air like a violent storm. 1 sword, 1 move, 1 move, 1 sword. Under the inch step, Tang Yen displayed her sword techniques, but she was unable to hit Chumu. He was simply too agile. Brilliant! In the past, when I watched Chumu's battles, I only felt that they were not bad. But now I feel that they are soul-stirring. A 9-star sword of Gojoseon exclaimed. In the past, Chumu's opponents were only 7-star sword of Gojoseon. At most, he was an 8-star sword of Gojoseon. No matter how brilliant his battles were, in the eyes of a 9-star sword of Gojoseon, it was still not enough. It was like an adult strong man watching a child fight with exquisite skills. No matter how exquisite the child's skills were, it would be difficult for him to injure an adult strong man whose fighting skills were not inferior to his own and whose overall strength was far superior to his own. However, the adult strong man could easily defeat the child with great strength. And now, Chumu's strength had reached the level of a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. His opponent was also a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. When they fought, even Hua Yi, a 9-star pinnacle sword of Gojoseon, was shocked. Fighting with a 9-star sword of Gojoseon was also an excellent experience for Chumu. However, he discovered that it was very difficult to defeat an elite 9-star sword of Gojoseon without using his second-rank sword force. If he used his second-rank sword force, the power of his sword techniques would increase by 3 times. It should be enough to defeat an elite 9-star sword of Gojoseon like Tang Yen. However, it would be difficult to kill her. He treated Tang Yen as a whetstone to hone his sword technique. It was a very depressing thing to be treated as a whetstone. After Tang Yen discovered it, they fought for a while more before decisively retreating from the battle. She gloomily said, "I'm not fighting anymore. You are really abnormal." This sentence immediately caused a wave of laughter. Being called a pervert, Chu Mu didn't mind. The members of the 8th battle team were very happy. The stronger Chu Mu was, the better it was for the 8th battle team. After Tang Yen left, the members of the 8th battle team started chatting. The next day, Captain Dong Ting announced that he was going into seclusion. Everyone knew that Dong Ting was going into seclusion to make a breakthrough in his cultivation. He had been stuck at the peak of the 9th firmament of creation realm for more than 10 years. After continuous accumulation, he had reached his limit. After Dong Ting went into seclusion, the members of the 8th battle team temporarily did not need to go on missions. Other than cultivating as usual, they had more topics to discuss. After Dong Ting had his breakthrough, he would leave the Sword Edge ship and report to the Judgment ship to become a member of the Judgment ship. Dong Ting was the captain of the 8th battle team. Once he left, the captain's position would be vacant. Someone had to fill it. The captain of the 8th battle team was usually a member of the 8th battle team. Only the 2 vice-captains were qualified to be the captain. Everyone was discussing whether Shangguan Hua or Hua Yi was qualified to be the captain. The captain's position was not just a position. It was also a kind of glory and status. If there was a chance, no one would reject it. Shangguan Hua and Hua Yi were also secretly competing with each other. They both wanted to be the team leader, but this competition was not obvious because Dong Ting had not really broken through yet. Moreover, they were brothers in the same team. They would not fall out with each other over the position of team leader. Other than discussing whether Shangguan Hua or Hua Yi would be the captain, there were also people discussing who would be the vice-captain when the vice-captain's position was vacant. In my opinion, it should be Li Lianyun. He is very strong. No, I think it should be Min Chang. Everyone had their own opinions. They all had different candidates in mind. Suddenly, an 8-star sword of Gojoseon said mysteriously, "There is one more person that you have all forgotten." "Who?" everyone asked. "In our 8th battle team, who has the lowest cultivation but the strongest potential. Moreover, his strength has increased the fastest. Now, he can already compete with a 9-star sword of Gojoseon?" The 8-star sword of Gojoseon showed off. Everyone's eyes suddenly lit up. They said the same name in unison, Chu Mu. That's right. It's Chu Mu. Although his cultivation is the lowest among us, his strength is obvious. He fought with Tang Yen a few days ago. Moreover, Chu Mu has not used his sword force yet. Once he uses his sword force, his strength will be even stronger. He might even be able to defeat Tang Yen. Yes. Most importantly, Chu Mu's potential is amazing. He has only joined our 8th battle team for 3 years and his strength has increased from a 7-star sword of Gojoseon to a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. Give him 2 more years and he might even surpass the 2 vice-captains. Moreover, I remember that Chu Mu contributed a lot in 3 or 4 missions. He also got the most battle merit. I support him to be the vice-captain. It had to be said that Chu Mu was very popular in the 8th battle team because of his talent, potential, and strength. Moreover, he had turned the situation around several times during missions. Everyone admired him very much. Chu Mu knew about everyone's discussion. However, he did not take it to heart. It was not important to him whether he would be the vice-captain or not. However, when Chu Mu found out that there was a discount when exchanging battle merits as the vice-captain, he was somewhat tempted. The vice-captain had a 10% discount while the captain had a 20% discount. However, there was still no news of Dong Ting's breakthrough. Chu Mu only thought about it for a moment and did not take it seriously. Otherwise, he would lose his balance. Day after day passed and he cultivated as usual. The divine wilderness sword essence had reached the late fifth heaven of creation realm, and was gradually climbing to the peak of the late fifth heaven of creation realm. However, it would still take a considerable amount of time to break through to the sixth heaven. In addition, the progress in the cultivation of the astral tribulation body tempering technique was minimal. Chu Mu did not mind and continued to cultivate every day. Chu Mu was considering if he should use his battle merits to exchange for a higher level sword technique. The Mountain Sea sword technique was the highest level sword technique in his possession. Unfortunately, Chu Mu had not grasped some of the power of laws. Therefore, he could only use sword moves and was unable to unleash the full power of the Mountain Sea sword technique. Therefore, the highest level sword technique that he had grasped was the Autumn Water Sky sword technique. It was composed of the three elemental powers of the laws of metal, wood, and water. Although it was an Earth-class mid-tier sword technique, when executed by Chu Mu, it was comparable to or even better than an Earth-class high-tier sword technique. However, an Earth-class mid-tier sword technique was ultimately an Earth-class mid-tier sword technique. In some aspects, it could not be compared to an Earth-class high-tier or Earth-class peak-tier sword technique. He opened the exchange list and checked the sword technique column. The number of battle merits required for an Earth-class peak-tier sword technique was currently insufficient. Although he had already reached the silver rank and had accumulated more than 3,000 battle merits, it was still not enough. Although more than 3,000 battle merits seemed to be a lot, it was actually not much at all. It was only enough to exchange for an ordinary Earth-class high-tier sword technique. After looking at it, Chu Mu was not interested in those ordinary Earth-class high-tier sword techniques. It would be a waste of both battle merits and time to exchange for them to cultivate. For the time being, he put aside the idea of exchanging for a new sword technique. He also felt that the second-level sword force seemed to have reached the bottleneck. If he were to break through again, it would be the third-level sword force. The third-level sword force could increase the power of a sword technique by 4 times, making the sword technique more powerful. It would also significantly increase one's strength. However, it was also very difficult to break through from the second-level sword force to the third-level sword force. Unless there was some special opportunity to break through in a short period of time, it would take a lot of time and effort. It might take a few years or even longer. Looking at the situation, it seems that it is not possible to increase my strength quickly. Chu Mu was a little distressed. He sighed to himself and could only continue to cultivate step by step. If other swordsmen knew about his thoughts, they would probably vomit blood from anger. Chu Mu's speed of improvement was already very shocking. In just 3 years, he had increased his strength from a 7-star sword of Gojosian to a 9-star sword of Gojosian. Who knew how many people were envious of him? Even Hua Yi, who did not pay much attention to Chu Mu before, was secretly impressed. However, Hua Ye's personality was more unsociable, so he would not show it directly. However, Chu Mu, who had worked with Hua Yi to complete a mission, knew that Hua Yi was a good person. Time flew by. In a flash, a month had passed. Within this month, Chu Mu's strength had a slight increase, but it was not obvious. At the same time, there was a piece of good news. Dong Ting had come out of seclusion and had successfully broken through. In the 8th team's area, Dong Ting stood in front of the 8th team. Chu Mu could clearly feel that there was a special aura fluctuation on Dong Ting's body. It was like the smell of a new life. Chu Mu could not describe it clearly with words. This was because Dong Ting had just broken through to the Nirvana realm and had only slightly consolidated his strength. Once he had fully consolidated and adapted to his current strength, this aura would be restrained. Although this aura was weak, Chu Mu and the others felt that they could not fight against it. It was a kind of gap, an absolute gap. It was the gap between the Nirvana realm and the Nirvana realm. Even the extremely powerful 9-star sword of Gojosian was not a match for an ordinary first-level Nirvana realm swordsman. It was a kind of qualitative leap. Brothers, I have broken through. Soon, I will report to the adjudicator. Dong Ting said, I am honored to be your captain. I hope that we will have the opportunity to fight side by side in the future. We will, Captain. Captain, you have to develop well in the adjudicator. I hope that when we are there, we can still be in the same team as you. Chu Mu, your potential is outstanding. Maybe you will become the main force of the 8th team soon. Dong Ting said. Then, he looked at Shangguan Hua. Shangguan Hua, you Dong Ting evaluated everyone one by one and then left. Next, it was naturally the highlight of the show. The choice of the new captain. Shangguan Hua and Hua Yi could both become the new captain. However, who would be the new captain would have to wait for the decision of the combat division. According to the usual practice, a decision would be made within 3 days. However, 7 days had passed and there was still no news from the combat division. No one suspected anything and continued to cultivate. Chapter 1134. Inside the Vanguard Battalion, Chief Yun Feng was sitting opposite a middle-aged swordsman. I've already said, if Mo Fan can't convince the members of the 8th battle team, you can take him away, Yun Feng said. I know, if Mo Fan doesn't have the ability, he won't stay here with his arrogant personality, the middle-aged man said with a smile. Yun Feng nodded. He was the chief of a battalion, so he was well aware of the personalities of the members. For example, the 8th battle team, Dong Ting had broken through to the Nirvana realm. He was leaving the Vanguard Battalion to report to the Adjudicator Battalion and become a member of the Adjudicator Battalion. The 8th battle team had to choose a new captain. According to the usual practice, the new captain was chosen within the battle team. Normally, the battle team would choose the new captain and announce it. There were exceptions, such as a new captain being appointed out of nowhere, but such cases were rare. This time, if an old friend in the army hadn't put down his pride and repeatedly asked for it, Yun Feng wouldn't have agreed. Even if he did agree, there would be conditions. The new captain, Mo Fan, had to be able to convince the members of the 8th battle team. If he couldn't do it, they would have to obediently return to where they came from. My name is Mo Fan. From now on, I'm your captain, the unfamiliar swordsman with a cold face said in an indifferent tone. He looked younger than 30, but his actual age was more than 30. His cultivation was at the late stage of the 9th firmament of the fortune realm. There was a hint of arrogance between his eyebrows. It was likely that he had an extraordinary background and outstanding talent to have such arrogance. However, the members of the 8th battle team were not interested in such arrogance. They didn't gather together. Instead, they looked at Mo Fan. After hearing Mo Fan's words, they exchanged glances with one another, unable to react. Shouldn't the new captain be Vice Captain Shangguan or Vice Captain Hua Yi? Lin Kai murmured. His voice was not loud, but everyone could hear him. Mo Fan frowned when he heard it. His eyes flickered with displeasure, but he didn't say anything. He glanced around and observed every member of the 8th battle team. Before he came here, Chief Yun Feng had already told him some things. He knew that the new captain wouldn't be able to gain the approval of the 8th battle team immediately. If you don't agree, I'll defeat you all with my strength and convince you all. This was Mo Fan's idea, and what he planned to do. Why would there be a 5-star sword of Gojoseon? Mo Fan's gaze landed on Chu Mu as he frowned. He treated himself as the captain of the 8th battle team and said, I don't care what kind of background you have. However, a mere 5-star sword of Gojoseon is in my battle team. I will not allow that. Are you going to leave on your own, or do you want me to expel you? Chu Mu was slightly startled by Mo Fan's words, before his eyes flickered coldly. The rest of the members of the 8th battle team burst into laughter after recovering from the initial shock. They were not idiot. They could tell that the new captain, Mo Fan, was trying to establish his dominance. And the first step to establish his dominance was Chu Mu, the 5-star sword of Gojoseon. From the looks of it, he didn't do his homework properly. He didn't know that Chu Mu was the most dazzling member of the 8th battle team. If anyone treated him as a true 5-star sword of Gojoseon, they would be hopelessly stupid. That being said, perhaps director Yun Feng had purposely kept it a secret from Mo Fan. Even though Chu Mu is a 5-star sword of Gojoseon, he's still a member of the 8th battle team. He's our brother, Shangguanhua said as she stepped forward. Who are you? Mo Fan stared at Shangguanhua with glittering eyes. The vice-captain of the 8th battle team, Shangguanhua said calmly. Vice-captain. Mo Fan wore a cold grin. Are you disobeying my order? Was Mo Fan stupid? He was not stupid. He had his own reasons for choosing Chu Mu as his opponent. Shangguanhua had stepped forward, and was the vice-captain of the 8th battle team. She must be quite reputable in the 8th battle team. If he could defeat Shangguanhua, it would be easier for him to convince the members of the 8th battle team. I don't care what kind of background you have, but if you want to show off, you've come to the wrong place, Shangguanhua said coldly. It seems like you're planning to have a taste of my sword skills. Mo Fan's eyes emitted a cold flicker as he dashed toward Shangguanhua. Then let's see if you have the right to do so, Shangguanhua said coldly. Even if Hua Yi was appointed as the new captain, he would not have any objections, nor would he feel uncomfortable about it. However, he was extremely displeased when a new captain was appointed out of nowhere. It was not a big deal to recruit a new member, but the position of captain was not that simple. A person who did not contribute anything to the 8th battle team was asking to be their captain. What did he think the 8th battle team was? Mo Fan was trying to convince the 8th battle team with his strength, while Shangguanhua was trying to intimidate him. She knew some captains who were appointed out of nowhere were only here to gain experience. They would leave once they were done. A person like that would definitely have a strong background, yet he was only the vice-captain of the 8th battle team. Without a strong background, she could not change the fact. She could only ask him to behave himself, so he would not kill his teammates during the mission. The crowd dispersed. They knew Shangguanhua was trying to intimidate Mo Fan. As for the new captain, since they were already here, it was most likely the decision had been made. Even if they were unwilling to accept it, there was nothing they could do to change it. Please, Shangguanhua said. Take this. Mo Fan yelled as he unsheathed his sword. A dragon's cry was heard as he slashed forward. His body followed the sword as he merged with it, turning into a blue dragon that roamed the sky. The first move of the blue dragon sword art, blue dragon roaming. The crowd's expression changed as the blue dragon roaming let out a dragon's cry. It's a Tian sword art. Chu Mu and the others were shocked. A Tian sword art was stronger than an earth sword art. It could be exchanged for 100,000 battle points. Even Shangguanhua and Dong Ting did not have the ability to exchange for it. Mo Fan's background had raised the crowd's opinion of him. Even if it's a Tian sword art, I'll still defeat you, Shangguanhua said with a cold harumph as he drew his sword. The sword light left a shadow behind. In terms of cultivation, Shangguanhua was a level higher than Mo Fan. Mo Fan was in the late stage of the 9th layer fortune realm, while Shangguanhua was in the peak of the 9th layer fortune realm. In terms of strength, they were more or less equal. However, Mo Fan was using a heaven-class low-tier sword art, while Shangguanhua was using a earth-class top-tier sword art. However, Shangguanhua had gone through hundreds of battles. His experience was not something a young master like Mo Fan could compare to. Actually, Mo Fan was not bad either. He was a genius, a true genius with rich experience. However, compared to Shangguanhua, there was still a gap. As soon as the battle began, Mo Fan knew that he did not have the advantage in terms of battle experience. His only advantage was that he had mastered a Tian sword art. This was something his opponent did not have. Thus, he had to use his advantage to defeat his opponent. It would be best if he defeated him beautifully. Only then would he be able to convince his opponent. The sword was like an azure dragon. The dragon carvings on Mo Fan's sword seemed to have come alive, increasing the power of his sword art. The thin sword in Shangguan Hua's hand drew out sword flowers. The sword flowers left afterimages. Each of the afterimages contained shocking power as they charged at Mo Fan from all directions. When the 9-star sword of Gojoseon went all out, its power was shocking. The sword wind was extremely sharp. Even the 7-star sword of Gojoseon did not dare to get close to it. Chu Mu and the others retreated far away to watch the battle between the two. Hua Yi clenched his fist. He hoped that Shangguan Hua would win. That way, this new captain would not be so arrogant, and they would not be disturbed too much. Every member of the 8th battle team hoped that Shangguan Hua would win. Shangguan Hua was very agile. His footwork was like a butterfly. He kept dodging Mo Fan's sword art. At the same time, he used the shadow sword art to counterattack. His shadow sword art was not as good as the azure dragon sword art. However, Shangguan Hua was better than Mo Fan in terms of their respective sword arts. This battle would not end in a short period of time, unless he used some kind of trump card. However, trump cards were trump cards. They would only be used in a life and death situation. Normally, people would not use their trump cards in a battle like this. Chu Mu watched without blinking. He had also reached the level of a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. In the future, he would have to fight a 9-star sword of Gojoseon. Therefore, watching the battle between other 9-star swords of Gojoseon was very beneficial for him, especially when the battle was between Shangguan Hua and Mo Fan, who were the elites of the 9-star sword of Gojoseon. Watching, comparing notes, and even putting himself in the shoes of Shangguan Hua or Mo Fan, how would he deal with their attacks if his opponent was Shangguan Hua or Mo Fan? Without a doubt, it was very exhausting. However, Chu Mu felt that it was worth it. This was also his first time witnessing the power of a Tian-class sword art. The roar of the azure dragon, a myriad of phenomena. It was indeed not something an Earth-class sword art could compare with. The difference between an Earth-class sword art and a Tian-class sword art was not just the difference in the quantity of the force of heaven and earth. There seemed to be other mysteries involved as well. However, Chu Mu had never practiced a Tian-class sword art, nor had he come into contact with it. Thus, he was not clear on what the difference was. The two sides had been fighting for half an hour, and were in a stalemate. At this moment, Shangguan Hua's rich experience from hundreds of battles came into play. She sharply grasped a flaw in Mo Fan's sword and immediately used it to launch a powerful counterattack. Under Shangguan Hua's counterattack, Mo Fan's expression changed. He quickly changed his sword move, but it was a bit slower. A bit was enough to determine the outcome of the battle. Shangguan Hua's sword pierced through the overlapping shadows and stopped in front of Mo Fan's throat. Meanwhile, Mo Fan's sword was still 3 inches away from Shangguan Hua. "You've lost," Shangguan Hua said indifferently. She withdrew her thin sword and drew out a few sword flowers before sheathing it back into its sheath. Mo Fan's expression was extremely ugly. After sheathing his sword, he turned around and walked out of the 8th team area without looking back. "Vice Captain Shangguan, well done. You should be the one to take the position of captain." Chapter 1135. Yun Feng and the middle-aged man were still talking to one another in the swordsman battalion, but their mission was not related to the battle. It was just a casual conversation. The door to the battalion opened on its own. A man quickly walked in. "Xiao Fan, you're back. How did it go?" The middle-aged man turned around and asked with a smile after seeing who it was. He then frowned when he saw Mo Fan's pale face. Yun Feng also saw it. He seemed to understand and smiled, but didn't say anything. "I lost," Mo Fan said. "You lost." The middle-aged man frowned before relaxing. "It's fine if you lost. No one can win all the time. Brother Yun, since Xiao Fan lost, I'll bring him away from here as promised. No, third uncle, I don't want to leave, Mo Fan said. Why? Mo Fan's third uncle asked. Yun Feng was staring at Mo Fan too. He wondered if Mo Fan was going to break the promise. If that was the case, there was no way he would agree to it, even if he was quite close to Mo Fan's father. I want to stay and join the 8th battle team as a member, Mo Fan said firmly. Mo Fan said firmly. He had lost to Shangguan Hua. His goal was to defeat Shangguan Hua. Both Yun Feng and his third uncle were startled by Mo Fan's words. They were confused, but Yun Feng soon realized the truth. Mo Fan's third uncle was no ordinary sword artist. He immediately understood what Mo Fan had gone through. He was familiar with Mo Fan's personality. It was difficult to change his mind once he had made up his mind. He was not willing to change his mind either. Brother Yun, Mo Fan is quite talented and has a good temperament, but he's too eager to excel. Everything goes smoothly, so I'm thinking, why don't we let him stay and let him be a normal member? Mo Fan's third uncle transmitted his voice. He did not want Mo Fan to hear him. Sure. Yun Feng thought for a while and agreed. Compared to being a captain, being an ordinary member was a small matter. Mo Fan had no choice but to stay after Yun Feng agreed. What new captain? No matter how cocky he is, he will still be defeated in the end, Lin Kai said. He was famous in the 8th battle team for being talkative. Vice Captain Shangguan is the best. Shangguan Hua smiled. It was not easy for him to defeat Mo Fan. If Mo Fan's experience was on par with his, the outcome of the duel would be unpredictable. Actually, what he said to Chu Mu is what surprised me the most. An 8-star sword of Gojoseon laugh. The others also laugh. Alright, let bygones be bygones. Only we know how strong Chu Mu is. There's no need to publicize it. It's not strange for others to underestimate him, Shangguan Hua said. Chu Mu actually didn't have much of an opinion about whether he was being looked down upon or not. It was just a small farce. Let bygones be bygones. But at this moment, the door to the 8th team's area opened once again, and a person walked in with large strides. It's you? Isn't this the new captain? Why are you here again? Someone immediately asked. They were unaware of the agreement between Yun Feng and the man. Defeating Mo Fan was only a show of strength. However, they did not expect him to return so soon after being defeated. It seemed like he had a thick skin. Of course, he had a firm will too. However, his complexion didn't look too good. Especially after being ridiculed by that rhetorical question, his complexion turned even uglier. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that his reason for staying was just like what his third uncle had said. Everything was going smoothly, and he rarely encountered any setbacks. He could not help but feel angry after being provoked. Luckily, he still had some rationality left. I'm not the captain. I'm just an ordinary member. Mo Fan took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. Everyone was startled when they heard Mo Fan's words. They were confused. What was he trying to do? You don't need to know the details. Anyway, from now on, Mo Fan is a member of the 8th battle team. Yunfeng's voice sounded as he walked in from outside. Besides, since the previous captain, Dong Ting, has broken through to the Nirvana realm, the position of the captain of the 8th battle team is vacant. Therefore, I'm here to announce the new captain of the 8th battle team. As soon as he finished speaking, Shangguan Hua and Hua Ye's breathing quickened. Although it was very weak, it represented the excitement in their hearts. The others also looked at Yun Feng, waiting for him to announce the result. The new captain is... As if he was deliberately showing off, Yunfeng's voice paused. When he saw the hope on everyone's faces, he continued, Shangguan Hua. Congratulations, Captain Shangguan. Yunfeng smiled at Shangguan Hua. I hope that the 8th battle team will become stronger under your leadership. Yes, Chief. Shangguan Hua's heartbeat sped up. She straightened her body and replied firmly. Hua Ye's eyes dimmed. He was a little disappointed, but he quickly adjusted his mentality. He only had a 50-50 chance of becoming the captain. He did not dare to have too much hope. If he became the captain, he would naturally be happy. If not, there was nothing he could do. He could only treat it calmly. Shangguan Hua will be the captain. Her position as the vice-captain is vacant. You guys discuss among yourselves who will be the vice-captain. Yunfeng said. After you've discussed it, tell Captain Shangguan to inform me at the combat division. Chumu, you've done well in the past 3 years. Yunfeng said to Chumu. He then turned around and left. Congratulations, Captain Shangguan. You have to treat us this time. Congratulations, we'll treat you with good wine and food. The members of the 8th battle team yelled at Shangguan Hua. It's not a problem to treat us. It's a must. However, there's something important that needs to be done first. Only then can we properly celebrate, Shangguan Hua said with a smile. What is it? Lin Kai was straightforward. Kai, is there something wrong with your brain? Chief just mentioned it. Oh, Vice Captain? No problem, I vote for Chu Mu, Lin Kai said. Let's vote then, Shangguan Hua said. Whoever had the most votes in the end would be elected as the vice captain. After all, the person with the most votes would have the highest prestige. Apart from Mo Fan, the rest of the members voted for the candidate in their minds. In the end, there were 3 people with the most vote. Chu Mu was one of them. Shangguan Hua and Hua Yi could vote too. Shangguan Hua's vote was for Chu Mu, while Hua Ye's vote was for the others. Mo Fan stood to the side and watched coldly. After what had happened, he could no longer integrate himself into the 8th battle team, nor could he convince the others to treat him as their teammate. If it weren't for the previous incident, he would have more or less integrated into the team. However, Mo Fan was not bothered by it. He only had one goal in mind, to defeat Shangguan Hua. That was all. The final ranking was out after the votes were tallied. Chu Mu had obtained 15 votes, while the other 2 had obtained 10 votes and 9 votes respectively. None of them had obtained as many votes as Chu Mu. Chu Mu has obtained 15 votes. Therefore, the vice-captain of the 8th battle team is now Chu Mu, Shangguan Hua announced. Congratulations, vice-captain. The members congratulated Mo Fan. This is great. This is a joyous occasion. It's worth celebrating. That's right, it's time to celebrate. While the crowd was in high spirits, a 5-star sword of Gojoseon is now the vice-captain. It seems like it was a mistake for me to keep the 8th battle team, a cold voice said. The crowd turned around and saw Mo Fan. I didn't invite you to join the 8th battle team. If you want to leave, you can leave now, Lin Kai was the first to refute. Mo Fan acted as if he didn't hear it. He looked at Chu Mu and took a step forward, walking towards Chu Mu step by step. I'm not the captain, so I don't have the right to decide if you want to stay or leave. However, as a member of the 8th battle team, I don't think you have the right to be the vice-captain, Mo Fan said, ignoring Lin Kai's words. Mo Fan, the 8th battle team doesn't welcome you, Shangguan Hua frowned and said coldly as she blocked Mo Fan's path. Captain, I'm a member of the 8th battle team. Director Yunfeng has agreed to it, so your objection is useless. Mo Fan grinned and said proudly, therefore, as a member of the 8th battle team, I'm not satisfied with the strength of the vice-captain. Therefore, I would like to challenge the vice-captain. Are you trying to pick a fight? Lin Kai snapped. The rest of the team was enraged too. They all glared at Mo Fan with unfriendly looks. You can think whatever you want, but as a member of the 8th battle team, I have the right to make a request. I don't think a 5-star sword of Gojoseon is qualified to be the vice-captain, so I would like to challenge him, Mo Fan said fearlessly. So what if you want to challenge me? Chu Mu asked calmly. There was no way he would turn a blind eye to Mo Fan's provocation. It's simple, if you lose, it means you don't have the right to be the vice-captain, Mo Fan said. I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen anyone as shameless as you. Lin Kai said, a 9-star sword of Gojosian dares to challenge a 5-star sword of Gojosian? It's a disgrace to the 8th battle team. It doesn't matter what you say, it won't change the fact that I'm going to challenge you. Mo Fan's skin was unexpectedly thick, however. You're a 5-star sword of Gojosian. I'm sure you're outstanding since you're chosen to be the vice-captain. However, considering the huge difference between your cultivation and mine, it's a little unfair to you. How about this? If you can withstand 3 of my attacks, I'll consider you qualified to be the vice-captain. The crowd was startled hearing this. They tried their best to hold back their laughter. However, Mo Fan mistakenly thought Chu Mu was unable to withstand 3 of his attacks. If you challenge me and I lose, I'll lose the vice-captain's position. What do you want from me if I win? Chu Mu asked in return. You can name anything, as long as it's something I have, Mo Fan said. He believed Chu Mu had no chance of withstanding 3 of his attacks. I think your heaven-ranked sword art is quite impressive, Chu Mu said. That's impossible. The Azure Dragon sword art is never taught to outsiders. If I can't defeat you in 3 attacks, I'll give you a sword art that's comparable to an advanced Earth sword art, Mo Fan said. It's a deal, Chu Mu said. We'll be the witnesses, the others said with a smile, looking forward to the duel. Chapter 1136. The members of the 8th battle team consciously stepped aside, giving Chu Mu and Mo Fan the stage. They were all expressionless, but the corners of their eyes would occasionally reveal the thoughts in their hearts. It was very comical, very funny. They were all imagining how wonderful Mo Fan's expression would be when he truly fought with Chu Mu and discovered that Chu Mu, an unremarkable 5-star sword king that he didn't even put in his eyes, had the strength of an elite 9-star sword king. Just the thought of it made them feel an inexplicable sense of pleasure. They were looking forward to seeing Mo Fan's expression change. Vice-Captain Chu, you have to do your best. Hold on for 3 moves. Lin Kai yelled. Everyone understood the meaning behind his word. Only Mo Fan misunderstood. He smiled and said, Don't worry, I'll go easy on you. Then I'll have to trouble you. Chu Mu was suddenly speechless. Initially, he thought Mo Fan was an arrogant person. However, he now realized that he wasn't just arrogant, he was arrogant to the point of being ignorant. Apart from the Heaven-class low-tier Azure Dragon sword art, I've also practiced other Earth-class sword art. I'll use the Earth-class advanced sword art to fight you in 3 moves, Mo Fan said. He indeed didn't treat Chu Mu as an opponent. He felt that using the Azure Dragon sword art against Chu Mu was overestimating him. Indeed, Chu Mu was able to stay in the 8th battle team, and was even chosen as the vice-captain. He must have some outstanding points. However, in Mo Fan's opinion, even if he was outstanding, he would at most have some potential. It was impossible for him to have the strength of a 5-star sword of Gojosian against a 9-star sword of Gojosian. As a matter of fact, if Chu Mu was able to fight against a 7-star sword of Gojosian with the strength of a 5-star sword of Gojosian, Mo Fan already felt that it was pretty good. Some geniuses were always arrogant. Before they saw it with their own eyes, they always felt that no matter how talented the other person was, they wouldn't be much better than themselves. What you hear may be false, but seeing is believing. Up to you. Chu Mu said, I hope you won't find any excuses when the time comes. Don't worry. How could I, Mo Fan, find an excuse for a 5-star sword of Gojosian? Besides, a hint of mockery flashed across Mo Fan's face. I don't need it. Chu Mu's expression was indifferent, and his heart was calm. Mo Fan drew his sword light out of its scabbard, followed by a loud roar. The sword light was faintly discernible, as if it had turned into a giant python rising into the air. It twisted in the air before diving down at lightning speed. This Earth-ranked high-tier sword technique was actually the foundation of the Azure Dragon sword technique. It was called the Azure Python sword technique. Even though he was only using the first move of the Earth-class Advanced Azure Python Sword Art, Mo Fan still used his full strength without holding back. Chu Mu knew a Heaven-class Sword Art, but he used an Earth-class Sword Art to deal with it. This was a form of contempt. Their contempt for Chu Mu made the members of the 8th Battle Team secretly angry. Chu Mu was the vice-captain of the 8th Battle Team. He was their life and death partner and a good brother. How could they not be angry when someone looked down on their brother? Regardless of whether it was contempt or not, it did not shake Chu Mu's heart in the slightest. Facing Mo Fan's sword technique, Chu Mu's body was like an arrow leaving the bow as he flew out. The 5-phase sword was unsheathed and a sword slashed out. A desolate, killing intent filled the air, and the sword light was like autumn water, crossing the vast sky. Autumn water long sky. Chu Mu's autumn water long sky slashed the giant python in half, startling Mo Fan. He realized that Chu Mu's strength was more powerful than he had imagined. With a cold shout, he executed the second move of the Azure Python Sword Art. The giant python soared through the sky, and its terrifying tail whipped over, causing the void to emit a shattering sound. With a sword cry, wind and lightning surged. The 32 swords arrived in an instant, destroying the tail. Mo Fan's sword technique changed once again. The giant python coiled around Chu Mu as it hissed, intending to kill Chu Mu. At the crucial moment, Chu Mu's body fell like a meteor. The 5-phase sword continuously executed the Gale Quick sword and the 32 wind and lightning sword to block the giant python's counterattack. The tip of his foot touched the ground as he rapidly retreated. Chu Mu said to Mo Fan, who was about to execute the fourth move of the Azure Python Sword Art, 3 swords have passed. Mo Fan's expression changed as he stopped moving. His face alternated between green and white. His eyes flickered with a frightening light, as if he wanted to pierce through Chu Mu. No matter what, he never imagined that with the strength of a 9-star sword of Gojoseon, he would be unable to defeat a 5-star sword of Gojoseon in 3 swords. Impossible! Mo Fan roared. For a moment, he found it hard to accept this fact. 3 swords have passed. Are you trying to go back on your words? Lin Kai demanded coldly. The other members of the 8th squad were staring at Mo Fan with unfriendly looks. Mo Fan's heart shuddered as his face turned pale. He quickly collected his thoughts. No, I won't go back on my words. It's true that 3 swords have passed. According to our agreement, if I can't defeat you in 3 swords, it's my loss. Saying this, Mo Fan waved his hand and fired a thin piece of paper at Chu Mu. It tore through the air at a high speed, producing a terrifying screech that made everyone's scalp turn numb. The crowd was startled. They could tell that the piece of paper was filled with Mo Fan's sword intent, the power of the rules, and the sword intent. It combined into one and contained some kind of mystical power. It was utterly terrifying. Chu Mu's eyes widened. He swung the 5-phase sword forward. At that instant, the trajectory of the sword changed a few dozen times, stabbing into the air. The power of the sword affected the speed and rotation of the piece of paper, and erased the mystical power it contained. Mo Fan reached out his left hand and pinched the piece of paper between his fingers. It was a very thin piece of paper, but it was made of a unique material. It felt great to the touch. There was a line of words on it, and the picture of a person holding a sword. Eternal Sword Force. Chu Mu glanced at it and was confused when he saw the words at the top. Mo Fan, it's only a piece of paper. Do you really think you can use it as a wager just because of the content on it? Lin Kai said with a hollow laugh. A piece of paper, how ignorant. Mo Fan let out a hollow laugh. It's the first move of a nameless sword art. The elders of the Zhou Sword Division of the Sacred Sword Hall have rated it as a heaven-tier sword art. Even if it's only a single move, its value is comparable to an advanced Earth-tier sword art. It might even be comparable to a peak Earth-tier sword art. The crowd was startled. The Zhou Sword Division of the Sacred Sword Hall was a division that specialized in the study of sword art. The members of the division all had high attainments in sword arts, and they also had a high comprehension of sword art. The elders, in particular, had a better comprehension of sword arts than ordinary swordsmen. Since the development of the ancient god realm, there had been countless swordsmen of the human race. There were also some amazing swordsmen who had created amazing sword art. However, due to some reasons, they had become incomplete. After the later generations obtained them, they were unable to display their full power. After the research of the Zhou Sword Division, there was a chance that it could be repaired. It might even be comparable to the original work. Since the sword art on this piece of paper had been rated as a heaven-tier sword art by the elders of the Zhou Sword Division of the Sacred Sword Hall, its value would naturally not be inferior to an advanced earth-tier or even a peak earth-tier sword art. According to the agreement, Mo Fan had not violated the rules by taking out this sword art. However, the crowd was confused. Why would Mo Fan take out a sword art with such great potential as a wager? Was there something fishy going on? Mo Fan's face was cold, but he was actually quite happy. There were two reasons why he had taken out this sword art. Although the nameless sword technique had great potential, even surpassing the Azure Dragon sword technique, it only had one move, and that was the Eternal Sword technique. That was the first reason why Yi Futian was unable to learn it. No matter how profound or strong a sword art was, the first move would always be the weakest move. If there was only the first move, it would be better to cultivate other advanced earth-tier sword art. The second reason was that this move was extremely difficult to cultivate. He had personally practiced it for more than half a year, but there was no sign of him getting started. Apart from him, as far as he knew, even the elders of the Zhou Sword Division had tried to cultivate it. They spent a few months, but they were still unable to get started. There was only one reason for this. Either the only move of this nameless sword art was incomplete, or it was too profound. After studying it, the elders of the Zhou Sword Division came to the conclusion that it was the former. This was because the elders of the Zhou Sword Division all had talent in sword arts that far surpassed other sword practitioners. Even with the wisdom of everyone, they were still unable to decipher it. The explanation leaned towards the former. Of course, there was also a possibility of the latter. I've already given you the wager. The bet is complete. Whether you want it or not is your business. Mo Fan threw down these words and turned around to leave. He didn't get a complete advanced Earth tier or peak Earth tier sword art like he had imagined. However, Chu Mu also understood Mo Fan's attitude. This was the only thing he could do. However, he was a little curious about the sword art recorded on the paper. He first put away the paper. After a little preparation, the celebration began. The celebration was nothing more than drinking wine, eating meat, discussing and so on. It was very enjoyable. Among the 35 people of the 8th battle team, apart from Mo Fan, the other 34 people all participated. After the celebration, everyone returned to their rooms to rest. After sleeping for about 4 hours, he woke up. His sword energy circulated, and the smell of alcohol disappeared. He felt refreshed. After cultivating the divine desolate sword energy and the calamity of the stars, Chu Mu practiced various sword arts. Then, he took out the paper. The material of the paper was not ordinary. Chu Mu used a little strength, but he was actually unable to tear it open. However, he felt that if he used more strength, he could tear the paper open. However, he did not continue to try. His goal was not the paper, but the sword art recorded on it. Eternal Sword Force. When Chu Mu focused on these 3 words, he suddenly felt an incomparably mysterious feeling. He only felt that it was mysterious, but he didn't know what it was. He shifted his gaze and looked at the picture. It was a person holding a sword in front of his chest. His eyes were looking at the sword with a solemn and devout expression. This picture still gave Chu Mu an incomparably mysterious feeling. It was even stronger than the 3 words. However, after looking at it for a while, he was still unable to comprehend anything. The mystery was like a rootless duckweed, like a dancing dandelion. It was always floating, unable to grasp it. After studying it for another 2 hours, he was still unable to comprehend anything from the 3 words and picture. Chu-Mu temporarily gave up and looked at the content. Chapter 1137. Becoming the vice captain did not have any clear impact on Chu-Mu's daily life. He cultivated when he needed to cultivate, and rested when he needed to rest. Everything was as usual. There were not many opportunities to go on missions. Sometimes, after a year, there would not be a single mission. Because of Chu-Mu's outstanding perception and attainments in sword arts, people would often ask him for advice on sword art. In addition to cultivating the divine desolate sword essence and the calamity of the star's body refining cultivation method and various sword arts, Chu-Mu had one more thing to do, and that was to comprehend the eternal sword force. The content of the eternal sword force was very short. It was not more than 100 words, and these 200 words were very mysterious. It was like a person on earth, who did not know much about ancient literature and was faced with a book full of words. He would have a feeling of dizziness. From the 3 words eternal sword force and the picture, he only felt that it was mysterious, but he was unable to comprehend anything. He was unable to comprehend anything from the short 100 words. However, the more he comprehended, the more he felt that it was incomparably mysterious. It was mysterious, pure mysterious. However, Chu-Mu could not figure out where the mystery was. With Chu-Mu's monstrous perception, even in the ancient god world, he was one of the top few existences. After a month of diligent comprehension, he did not even understand the surface. Chu-Mu roughly knew what Mo-Fan was thinking at that time. He believed that Chu-Mu would not be able to comprehend anything, so he gave the paper to Chu-Mu. Thinking about it, it was just a copy. Copy. The 3 words flashed through his mind, and Chu-Mu was immediately stunned. The profoundness of some martial arts lay in the original copy. Only by studying the original copy could one comprehend it. Copying the contents of the original copy was difficult to copy the profoundness as well. Even the most advanced copying method could only copy a portion of the profoundness. Thinking about it, the reason why he was unable to comprehend the eternal sword force should be related to the copy. It would be great if I could comprehend the original, Chu-Mu thought to himself. However, that was impossible unless he joined the Zhou Sword Division of the Heavenly Sword Hall and became a member with a higher status. That was an extremely difficult task. Of course, if there was a chance, Chu-Mu would fight for it. However, he did not want to join the Zhou Sword Division. It was only a division that researched sword techniques and was not good at fighting. Since he could not comprehend it, Chu-Mu could only put it aside for now. Over the past month, Mo-Fan had challenged Shangguanhua twice, and lost to her sword too. However, judging from Mo-Fan's reaction, he would challenge her a 3rd or 4th time until he won the duel. Today was Mo-Fan's 3rd time challenging Shangguanhua. This time, I will defeat you, Mo-Fan said. Even though he had been defeated several times, it did not affect his condition at all. Apart from his personality, Mo-Fan was indeed an outstanding swordsman. The two fought fiercely once again. Shangguanhua was still using her signature shadow sword art, while Mo-Fan was using the blue dragon sword art. In the 3 challenges, Mo-Fan's swordsmanship was even more powerful. I'm going to lose to Captain Shangguanhua for the 3rd time, Lin Kai said. Chu-Mu was silent. He had a bad feeling that Mo-Fan was going to win this time. Shangguanhua's expression turned serious. Every time she fought Mo-Fan, the pressure was getting stronger and stronger. This time, Shangguanhua could not guarantee that she would win. The battle was intense. The sword light shadow sword, the blue dragon's roar, and the sword wind wreaked havoc. Suddenly, Mo-Fan's sword turned into a dragon as he soared into the sky. He paused a few dozen meters in the air and dove down like a blue dragon piercing through the sky, bringing with it a destructive aura. The dragon's roar was mighty, causing everyone's expression to change. Shangguan Hua's face was even more serious. Falling down, there was no way to dodge. She could only take it head-on. The terrifying fifth move of the blue dragon's sword art was so powerful that it made people tremble. Everyone knew that this was Mo Fan's first time using this move. Judging from his inexperience, it was most likely a move that he had just learned not too long ago. In the midst of the explosion, a figure was sent flying. It was Shangguan Hua. She only managed to stop after flying a few dozen meters. Her face was pale, and the hand that was holding the sword was trembling. The blood in her body was surging. Mo Fan landed on the ground. In the midst of the explosion, the blue dragon's roar was heard. The fourth move turned into a blue dragon, as if it was about to burst out of the mountain. It carried with it a terrifying force that could destroy mountains as it charged toward Shangguan Hua. Everyone's expression changed. Mo Fan had used his full strength in this move. It was obvious that he was trying to severely injure Shangguan Hua. Hua Yi dodged from the side and drew his sword. The sword seemed like it was going to split the sea in half. It was boundless and majestic as it charged toward the blue dragon. After the collision, Hua Ye's body was sent flying a few dozen meters away, while Mo Fan was sent flying 10 meters away. "This is just a friendly duel. How could you use such a heavy hand?" Hua Ye's face turned pale as he said angrily. "Humph, you've lost." Mo Fan coldly harumphed as he stared at Shangguan Hua. "You've won," Shangguan Hua admitted. "I've achieved my goal. There's no need for me to stay here any longer," Mo Fan said with a cold smile. "From now on, I have nothing to do with the 8th battle team." Saying this, he glanced at Chu Mu before he turned around and left in a carefree manner, leaving the crowd exchanging glances with one another. Chu Mu could not help but exclaim, "What a weirdo! It's good that he's gone. He didn't want to ruin the atmosphere. Yeah, I feel uncomfortable every time I see him." Everyone was overjoyed that Mo Fan had left the 8th battle team. Although he had joined the 8th battle team, he had no intention of being united with them. They did not like his arrogant attitude. It felt like he was a thorn in an egg. Now that the thorn had left on its own, it could not be any better. Not long after Mo Fan left the Vanguard ship, the Vanguard ship suddenly sent out an announcement. The trial altar was about to open. Those who were interested in participating in the trial of 100 tribes could go to the chiefs to register. Trial altar. Trial of 100 tribes. After hearing this, Chu Mu was startled. It was his first time hearing this, so he was a bit surprised. The trial of 100 tribes is about to begin again. Once every 100 years. Calculating the time, it's about time. Chu Mu immediately asked, "What was the trial of 100 tribes?" The ancient god world had over 100 tribes, called the 100 tribes. During the age of the gods, the god of the 100 tribes had opened up an absolutely independent space, a complete world. It was an independent world that was similar to the laws of the ancient god world. It was called the Trial Realm. The Trial Realm was a place for the younger generation of the 100 tribes to enter and experience life and death. The Trial Realm only opened once every 100 years. Every time it opened, there would be various younger generations that would enter and experience life and death. It was rumored that there were countless rare treasures within the Trial Realm, and even a large amount of inheritances. Those that could enter the Trial Realm and come out alive would often have their strength greatly improved, and their future would be even brighter. Each and every one of them would be famous throughout the ages. Therefore, the Trial Realm was also jokingly called the Path of the Strong. Therefore, every time the Trial Realm opened, there would be a large number of people from the 100 tribes who wanted to enter. However, there were conditions for entering. Simply put, the purpose of the Trial Realm was to find out more talented existences among the geniuses of the 100 tribes, so that these more talented juniors could grow better. Therefore, to enter the trial realm, one had to fulfill two conditions. First, bone age below 80 years old. Second, strength at least of 7-star king level. In the ancient god world, using the human clan as an example, there were many swordsmen who had reached the level of 7-star sword of Gojoseon before the age of 80. It was rumored that after the Great War of the Gods, the trial realm had disappeared without a trace. It was not until 10,000 years ago that it was rediscovered by the experts of the various temples, and they spent nearly 1,000 years to rebuild the altar. It opened once every 100 years, and every time it opened, it would consume a large amount of energy. Therefore, the younger generation of the 100 tribes who wanted to enter the trial realm also had to pay a corresponding price. The price to pay before entering was so that they could reap better rewards after entering. However, the trial realm is really too dangerous. If you are not careful, you will die inside. Even the powerful 9-star sword of Gojoseon is no exception. I want to go, Huayi said. I want to go too, Lin Kai said, his tone firm. Let's go and sign up together, Chumu said. He was very tempted. Chumu, although you are very strong and can fight against the 9-star sword of Gojoseon, the trial realm has an independent restriction. If you are not at the 7th heaven of creation realm, you will not be able to enter, Lin Kai said. I want to give it a try. Maybe I can, Chumu said. As long as there was a chance, he would not give up. Alright, there is no harm in trying. In the 8th battle team, only 12 people expressed their desire to sign up and enter the trial realm. Although entering the trial realm was a very good opportunity and danger coexisted. The greater the opportunity, the greater the danger. The number of people who could survive the danger and obtain the opportunity was estimated to be less than 1%, or even less. Moreover, the 8th battle team also needed someone to stay behind, and it could not be a small number. They decisively went to the combat division to look for Minister Yunfeng and explained their intentions. I don't object to you guys going, but Chumu, although your strength is not bad, your cultivation is too low. You probably won't be able to enter, Yunfeng said. Minister, I want to give it a try, Chumu said. It's useless even if you try. Since ancient times, it has been proven countless times that if your cultivation is not at the 7th heaven of creation realm, you will not be able to enter, Yunfeng said. Then, he immediately changed the topic. However, since you want to give it a try, it is good to go and take a look. Take it as an opportunity to broaden your knowledge. After all, there will be a large number of geniuses gathering. After the registration was approved, the next step was to wait for the arrangements. This was because there were more than the 6 people from the 8th battle team who wanted to go. 3 days later, the registration ended. On the Sword Edge, the total number of people who had signed up was 238. They were directly arranged into a small planetary-level starship. They left the Sword Edge and headed to the nearest medium-level or high-level planet. After some time, the starship arrived at the medium-level planet. More than 200 people were directly teleported to the planet closest to the trial altar through the Stargate of the Heavenly Sword Hall. Then, they boarded the starship and flew to the location of the trial altar. This starship was a large satellite-level starship. It could easily carry tens of thousands of people at the same time. More swordsmen rushed over from afar and gathered here. They boarded the starship and arrived at the trial altar to begin their journey as strong cultivators. Chapter 1138. There was a trial altar in every galaxy. It was usually hidden in the void and would only appear when it was about to open. The huge black trial altar was in the shape of an octagon, quietly fixed in the vast starry sky. It was 100 miles wide and looked like an incomparably powerful starry sky giant beast. It emitted a cold aura that swept out like a storm, causing people to tremble. Huge starships flew over from various planets of life and gathered around the pitch-black trial altar. Most of the people on the starships were genius swordsmen from this galaxy. If they could reach the seventh sky of creation realm before the age of 80, they could be considered geniuses. Of course, some of them came to watch the fun and increase their knowledge. The doors of the huge starships opened. The bridge extended out and connected to the trial altar. The swordsman passed through the bridge and entered the trial altar. Chumu also came out of the starship and stepped onto the trial altar with more than 200 companions of the sword vanguard. A grand aura of vicissitudes immediately surrounded him. The huge pitch-black trial altar constantly emitted a shocking cold aura. It made people tense up and not dare to speak loudly. Chumu keenly sensed that the aura of star power on the trial altar was clearer than on the starship. Moreover, it was all harmless. There must be related seals around the trial altar to prevent the harmful aura of star power from entering. It was an effective protection for the swordsman who stepped onto the trial altar. It took a while for people to get used to it. "There are so many people," Lin Kai exclaimed. He glanced around and saw a dense mass of human heads. The air was filled with the fluctuations of auras that the swordsman inadvertently leaked out. After they mixed together, although they were mixed, they were still very dense and very terrifying. "Let's go and register first," Hua Yi said. More than 200 people moved together. They squeezed through the crowd and walked toward the center of the trial altar. "Make way, don't block the way. Make way, all of you. Who dares to block the way of the disciples of the Dongwon clan?" The swordsmen who wanted to enter the trial realm all desperately squeezed through the crowd and walked towards the center of the trial altar while announcing their names. Chu Mu continued squeezing through the crowd while he sensed the presence of the sword of Gojoseon around him. Most of them were sword of Gojoseon in Blessed Realm. There were very few low-grade sword of Gojoseon, and most of them were middle-grade sword of Gojoseon or high-grade sword of Gojoseon. Many of the advanced sword of Gojoseon looked rather young. Perhaps their bone ages were not over 80 years old, but they all had the qualifications to enter the trial world. With everyone's cooperation, they continuously pushed their way through the crowd. Finally, they arrived at the center of the trial altar. All they needed to do was pass through that strange stone door. At that moment, a group cut in from the side. They were like a sharp sword, forcefully cutting in. They wanted to be the first to enter the strange stone door in a very domineering manner. How could the members of the Sword Vanguard ship let them do as they wished? They all increased their speed and collided with each other. Banging sounds rang out continuously. A 7-star sword of Gojoseon smirked and crashed into Chu Mu. He was tall and strong like a giant bear. He wanted to knock Chu Mu off his feet. With a bang, he realized that he was wrong. When he collided with Chu Mu, he felt as if he had crashed into an iron plate. He could vaguely hear the sound of bones cracking. He staggered back and blocked the others. The members of the Sword Vanguard ship had the advantage. They forcefully pushed the other party away, and were the first to break through the strange stone door and enter the center of the trial altar. No matter who you are, remember this. Anyone who dares to provoke the Black Sun Sword sect will not have a good ending. The group of people shouted at Chu Mu and the others. Black Sun Sword sect. Chu Mu's heart skipped a beat. The galaxy he was in was called the Black Sun Galaxy. The Dominator level force was the Black Sun Sword sect. The previous collision could be considered to have offended them. However, Chu Mu didn't care. No matter how strong the Black Sun Sword sect was, they couldn't contend with the Heavenly Sword Hall. Among the human race, no force could contend with the Heavenly Sword Hall. Even if the various Dominator-level forces joined forces, it would be difficult for them to go against the Heavenly Sword Hall. The Heavenly Sword Hall was the place where the faith of the human race was. It was the strongest and oldest existence among the human race. As for the disciple of the Dongwon clan was one of the 10 Dominator-level forces in the Black Sun Galaxy. However, after thinking about it, it was normal. The trial realm opened once every 100 years. There were countless rare treasures and opportunities inside. Entering the trial realm meant that one could obtain rare treasures and opportunities to strengthen oneself. Swordsmen who were committed to the path of the sword would be tempted. If it weren't for the small proportion of swordsmen who met the conditions to enter, the entire trial realm would be full. Such a rare opportunity was believed that the disciples of the various forces wouldn't let go of it. "Line up and come one by one," someone shouted. It was a swordsman from the Heavenly Sword Hall who was in charge of maintaining order. To enter the trial realm, one had to meet two conditions. The first condition was a hard one. One's bone age was below 80 years old. Those who were above 80 years old would definitely not be able to enter. The second condition wasn't a hard one. Except for Chumu, the other members who signed up on the Sword Edge ship were at least at the 7th firmament of creation realm. Moreover, their bone ages were below 80 years old. After passing the test, they met the conditions and paid 1 million low-grade primordial elixirs or 100,000 mid-grade primordial elixirs to obtain the qualifications to enter the trial realm. That's right. The price to enter the trial realm was primordial elixirs. 1 million low-grade primordial elixirs or 100,000 mid-grade primordial elixirs. For a 7-star Sword of Gojosian, 1 million low-grade primordial elixirs was actually a lot. Some 7-star Sword of Gojosian couldn't even afford it. Although some 7-star Sword of Gojosian could afford it, they had to save it up for many years. Fortunately, many swordsmen already knew that the trial realm was about to open a year in advance. They all made preparations and even sold treasures. Although the price to gather 1 million low-grade primordial elixirs was high, there were countless rare treasures in the trial realm. Its value was not something that 1 million low-grade primordial elixirs could compare to. A high price was for a higher income. Your cultivation is only at the 5th firmament of creation realm. You'd better leave quickly. The elder in charge of registration glanced at Chumu and said with a good attitude. Immediately, many people behind him started laughing. Where did this 5-star Sword of Gojosian come from? He doesn't even know this. I'm dying of laughter. Even a 5-star Sword of Gojosian came to join in the fun. What are you laughing at? Vice Captain Chumu's cultivation is not high, but if you really fight, you might not be his match. Lin Kai was very respectful of Chumu now. When he heard others laughing at him, he immediately became angry. What? I'm not a match for a 5-star Sword of Gojosian? Why don't you ask him to come and try? The 7-star Sword of Gojosian, who was yelled at by Lin Kai, said angrily. Stop arguing, the elder said. His voice suppressed the crowd. He looked at Chumu and said, Young man, you might be a genius and can fight across realms, but without the strength of a 7-star Sword of Gojosian's sword essence, you won't be able to enter the trial realm. Senior, I still want to give it a try, Chumu said. Senior, we are members of the Sword Vanguard. Even the head of our combat division admires Chumu very much. Please let him try. Hua Yi actually spoke up for Chumu. However, his voice was very soft, and only a few people nearby could hear him. Sword Vanguard Combat Division. The elder was from the Heavenly Sword Hall and obviously knew about the Sword Judgment Army. He looked at Chumu in surprise and then nodded. Okay, but according to the rules, if you can't enter, your elemental core will not be returned. The old man had made an exception. The reason for the exception was because Chumu was a member of Sword God Palace. In a sense, they could be considered companions. 1 million low-grade elemental cores were nothing to Chumu. After taking them out and paying, he was qualified. I think that 1 million low-grade elemental cores were wasted. However, this guy seems to be quite rich. He can easily take out 1 million low-grade elemental cores. Someone's eyes shone brightly as he said thoughtfully, treating Chumu as a fat sheep. There were also people who were puzzled. How could a 5-star Sword of Gojosian be qualified? After Chumu, the next person was still a member of the Sword Vanguard Combat Division. One by one, a 6-star Sword of Gojosian appeared. The cultivation technique I practice is brilliant. My sword origin at the sixth heaven of creation is comparable to a seventh heaven. Why can't I enter? This swordsman looked very cold and arrogant. There were also many 9-star sword of Gojoseon around him. They seemed to be guards. The elder was silent. He stared deeply at this cold and arrogant swordsman for a long time before nodding and letting him enter. This was because the second requirement to enter the trial realm was the quality of a seventh heaven sword origin or the attainment of a seventh heaven body tempering. Some genius swordsmen practiced very powerful cultivation techniques that made their sword origin extremely pure, enough to surpass one heaven. Naturally, they could also enter the trial realm. Of course, such swordsmen were extremely rare. After all, a cultivation technique that could make the quality of their sword origin comparable to a higher sword origin by one heaven was at least close to or even at the divine level. There were very few divine-level cultivation techniques in the ancient god world. This cold and arrogant swordsman naturally knew about Chu Mu. Therefore, after obtaining the qualification, when he walked past Chu Mu, he stared deeply at Chu Mu for a long time before leaving with a smile. Chu Mu was also a little surprised. A 6-star sword of Gojoseon had obtained the qualification. From the looks of it, he seemed very confident. The quality of his sword origin was comparable to a 7-star sword of Gojoseon. He was a genius. With his strength, he might be able to defeat a 7-star sword of Gojoseon and contend against an 8-star sword of Gojoseon. Chu Mu wondered which faction this disciple belonged to. People continued to pass and obtain the qualification. They gathered at the center of the trial altar, waiting for the altar to truly activate so that they could enter the trial realm. Finally, the time was up. The trial altar truly activated. The center trembled, and a ray of light shot into the sky. Amidst the rumbling, it was like a sword ray that pierced into the vast starry sky. It was endless. Chapter 1139. The huge light pillar soared into the sky, right before everyone's eyes. They felt like they were looking up at a tall mountain. Everyone's eyes were burning, and their hearts were restless. The trial realm is where I will rise. After entering the trial realm, my name will be passed down through the ages. The swordsmen clenched their fists and thought to themselves. When the light pillar became uniform, it meant that it was fully activated and could enter. There were many people, and they couldn't all enter at once. They could only enter in batches of 1,000 people. The order of entry was based on the order of registration. They couldn't fight or they would be disqualified. No matter who it was, they definitely wouldn't dare to fight or cause trouble here. The 200 people from the Sword Edge ship entered in 2 batches. When Chu Mu stepped into the light pillar, he felt like his entire body was bound by a force. He couldn't resist or even move. This force split into 2 parts. One part extended into his body, heading straight for his dantian. When it came into contact with the sword origin, it seemed to be verifying something. The other part swept through his entire body, checking his physique. After a while, the force retreated, and Chu Mu felt his entire body relax. Then, he felt like he was traveling through time and space. He couldn't tell north from south. That 5-star sword of Gojoseon can actually enter. Chu Mu's figure seemed to disintegrate in the light pillar. As the light pillar soared into the sky, it caused a series of exclamations. A 5-star sword of Gojoseon could actually enter the trial realm. Everyone couldn't help but feel shocked. The cold and arrogant 6-star sword of Gojoseon's eyes gleamed. He was also surprised that Chu Mu, a 5-star sword of Gojoseon, could enter the trial realm. After what seemed like tens of millions of years, Chu Mu felt his body reorganizing. When he opened his eyes, he saw many people staring with wide eyes, looking around curiously. The sky was gray, and there were traces of fog in the air. The ground was dark brown, as cold and hard as steel. When he looked carefully, there seemed to be some small holes. The place where everyone appeared was also an altar. This altar was very big, enough to accommodate more than 100,000 people at the same time. The people who entered in the previous batches were all here. This was the first time they had entered the trial realm, so everyone was looking around. Seals were set up around the altar to protect the people who had just entered the trial realm. The land outside the altar was spacious and empty, like a field. Further away, the line of sight became blurry, like a mountain range or a forest. It was frightening, as if there were countless hidden dangers. After looking around, Chu Mu looked at himself and found that his body seemed to be different. It was pure. Pure? Chu Mu scanned his body with his divine sense, and after a careful inspection, a hint of joy appeared on his face. It was as if his body had been cleansed, which would be beneficial for his future body refinement. However, Chu Mu soon discovered that the fluctuations of astral energy here were much weaker than in the outside world, but the astral energy here was much purer. Chu Mu made a comparison and found that the efficiency of cultivating astral tribulation here was much lower than in the outside world. However, his purpose here was to gain experience, not to cultivate, so he didn't care much about this point. More and more people appeared on the altar. After looking around, they prepared to set off and truly embark on the road of the trial realm. However, when the group of swordsmen stepped out of the trial altar, something strange happened. It was as if a cold wind blew past, and a strange, ear-piercing squeaking sound rang out. It was very sharp, and it startled everyone. Black shadows rushed out from the ground at an extremely fast speed, like streaks of black lightning. In the blink of an eye, they flew towards the sword of Gojoseon, who had left the altar. Vaguely, there seemed to be a cold light flashing past, and then a sword of Gojoseon's neck was torn open, blood spraying out. Slash! The sword of Gojoseon counterattacked with their swords, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. Let's attack! The sword of Gojoseon, who were still on the altar, roared. They also understood that if they allowed the sword of Gojoseon to be killed, then they would face a sudden attack after leaving the altar. It was impossible for them to stay on the altar all the time. In that case, they might as well not enter the trial realm. The sword of Gojoseon drew their swords and rushed out of the altar, fighting with the black shadows that were constantly flying out from the pit in the ground. Chu Mu's eyes narrowed slightly, and his incomparably sharp vision instantly caught the trajectory of a black shadow that was flying towards him. The five-phase sword was unsheathed, and with a flash of sword light, it followed the trajectory and slashed at the black shadow. Suddenly, an obscure feeling was transmitted over. The tyrannical sword directly sent the black shadow flying. After falling to the ground, it rolled a few times, struggled a few times, and let out a mournful squeak before dying. Chu Mu clearly saw the appearance of the black shadow. It looked like a type of creature with a rat's head and a rat's tail. Its entire body was black, and its body was not covered with fur, but pangolin-like scales. Its front claws were incomparably sharp and flashed with a cold light. With one sword, Chu Mu knew that this monster's defense was astonishing. The scales on its body could completely withstand the sharpness of an ordinary mid-grade saint sword. If it were not for Chu Mu's tyrannical strength, any other mid-grade sword of Gojoseon might not be able to break through its scales. This strange rat monster was extremely fast, and its claws were sharp. Its overall strength was comparable to a 7-star sword of Gojoseon. To enter the trial realm, Chu Mu and the others naturally had to do some research in advance. In the trial realm, there were tamed beasts. A long time ago, they were actually spirit beasts that were moved into the trial realm. Under the influence of the trial realm's environment, they gradually evolved into a new species, which was tamed beast. Tamed beasts were divided into 4 major levels, namely low-grade, mid-grade, high-grade, and super-grade. They corresponded respectively to the 7-star, 8-star, and 9-star cultivators of the 100 races, and cultivators who surpassed the 9-star but were below the nirvana realm. Among the low-grade, mid-grade, high-grade, and top-grade tamed beasts, There were another 4 levels. The low-grade, mid-grade, high-grade, and top-grade tamed beasts corresponded to the early, mid-grade, late-grade, and top-grade tamed beasts of each star level. There were relatively few super-grade tamed beasts, but the strength of each one was very terrifying. They could easily defeat and kill a 9-star peak. For example, in the human race, the same cultivation and the same star level, but the strength was not necessarily the same. Take Chu Mu as an example. At the level of a 5-star sword of Gojosian, he could contend against a 9-star sword of Gojosian. Among the tamed beasts there were naturally similar elite tamed beasts, and the king of the tamed beasts was the elite of the elite. Those supergrade tamed beasts were often evolved from the elite or even the king of the tamed beasts. In the records, the rat monster was a kind of tamed beast of the lowest level in the trial realm. It was also the tamed beast with the largest number. The rat monster constantly emerged from the underground pit. As soon as it appeared, it flew like lightning and attacked the sword of Gojosian. The number of rat monsters was many times more than the number of sword of Gojosian. At the other altars in the trial realm, there were also a large number of rat monsters besieging them. A fierce battle broke out, a bloody battle of life and death. Although Chu Mu was a 5-star sword of Gojosian, his true strength was enough to be comparable to an elite 9-star sword of Gojosian. It was not a trivial matter. It was not difficult to deal with the rat monsters. He did not even need to expose his full strength to kill the rat monsters one by one. Not far away, the cold and arrogant 6-star sword of Gojosian, under the protection of a dozen 9-star sword of Gojosian peak guards, was also fighting with the rat monsters. His strength was very tyrannical. Every sword could kill a rat monster. It seemed that his overall strength was very tyrannical, enough to be comparable to an ordinary 8-star sword of Gojosian. A 6-star sword of Gojosian was comparable to an 8-star sword of Gojosian. This was the first time Chu Mu had seen a super genius. As for the 14 9-star sword of Gojosian peak swordsmen, each of them had a cold and solemn expression. They had experienced hundreds of battles, and their strength was tyrannical. Chu Mu felt that they should be able to form a terrifying battle formation in an instant. Although the number of rat monsters was large, if Chu Mu was alone, he would not be able to gain any advantage. However, the sword of Gojosian had tens of thousands of people, and the number of rat monsters was only a few times more. On average, Chu Mu could only face 2 rat monsters at a time. There was no threat, so he could divert his attention to observe his surroundings. Blood splashed, and the mournful screams of the rat monsters before they died made one's scalp tingle. The bloody battle lasted for more than 2 hours, and the rat monsters finally stopped appearing. The dark brown ground was covered with rat monster corpses, and the dark red blood gathered into a swamp that stretched for more than 10 miles. An incomparably strong smell of blood floated in the air, and it was very pungent. A large number of rat monsters had died, and tens of thousands of swordsmen had also suffered losses. Several thousand sword of Gojosian had died under the claws of the rat monsters, and most of them were 7-star sword of Gojosian. Several thousand sword of Gojosian corpses were mixed in with the rat monster corpses, and it was a shocking sight. It was as if it was reminding everyone of the cruelty of the trial world. Everyone was silent for a moment, and then they moved and quickly left. Otherwise, the smell of blood here was likely to attract even more powerful training beasts. "Vice Captain Chu, let's go together," Lin Kai said. "No, I plan to go alone," Chu Mu said. Going through the trial together was indeed relatively safer, but Chu Mu had already thought about it. He wanted to go alone. Only by going alone could he display his strength to the fullest, and he wouldn't be restricted. Although going alone was more dangerous, if there was a harvest, he wouldn't have to share it with others. Of course, going through the trial together with others, other than the relatively higher safety factor, there were also other benefits. In short, each had its own benefits. Since you have already decided, I won't persuade you. I hope you will gain a lot in the trial world, Lin Kai said with a smile. I also hope you will have many opportunities in the trial world, Chu Mu said with a smile. In the 8th battle team, his relationship with Lin Kai was quite good. Perhaps it was because of the no discord, no concord. Everyone left one after another, and they all went in different directions. Chu Mu went alone, and he was immediately noticed by a group of Sword of Gojosian. He's actually alone? Is he planning to go alone? Seems like it. This guy is a 5-star Sword of Gojosian, but he can enter the trial world. The cultivation technique he practices must be extraordinary. Maybe it's a god-level cultivation technique. The 2 words god-level instantly made their blood boil. I think he might have practiced a god-level cultivation technique, and he might have a lot of Yuan Dan. Follow him and act according to the situation. Chapter 1140. The trial world was a world of its own. It had its own independent laws and was very complete. Thus, there was also the difference between day and night. There was also the scorching sun, bright moon, and stars that filled the sky. This was the 3rd day after entering the trial world. Chu Mu was walking alone on the icy ground of the trial world. Within the trial world, the king-level trial takers were restricted by the laws and couldn't fly at all. Even if they used their full strength, they could only fly for a short distance. Their strength would be greatly consumed. Although there were countless treasures and opportunities in the trial world, it wasn't so easy to encounter them. Especially when one had just entered the trial world and was at the edge of the trial world. Although he didn't encounter any treasures, he did encounter a few tamed beasts. They all died under Chu Mu's sword. Unfortunately, tamed beasts were useless. Chu Mu didn't know that there was a group of people following behind him. Every tamed beast that Chu Mu killed would be carefully examined by them. They would use this to deduce Chu Mu's strength. They were very cautious. They couldn't help but be cautious. They all guessed that Chu Mu had a god-tier cultivation method. His background must be very shocking. Since they wanted to obtain a god-tier cultivation method, they had to be very careful. If the slightest bit of news was leaked, their end would be very miserable. This tamed beast should be a mid-level tamed beast. It actually died under his sword. His strength isn't weak. I estimate that he's comparable to an 8-star Sword of Gojosian. Moreover, he's an elite 8-star Sword of Gojosian. One of the 8 Sword of Gojosian said after a careful examination. Combining all the previous signs, we can determine that this person's strength is comparable to an elite 8-star Sword of Gojosian. The leader of the group, a mid-level 9-star Sword of Gojosian, came to a conclusion. They wouldn't think higher because a 5-star Sword of Gojosian could have the strength of an elite 8-star Sword of Gojosian. It was undoubtedly a very frightening thing. That was a difference of 3 stars. Moreover, it was the difference between a mid-level Sword of Gojosian and a high-level Sword of Gojosian. Thinking of this, the hearts of the 8 Sword of Gojosian twitched. They felt that it was very amazing to fight across 1-star level. Fighting across 2 stars was inconceivable. Fighting across 3 stars was unheard of. This person, other than the possibility of a god-tier cultivation method, he must have other secrets. For example, a powerful body cultivation method. Otherwise, it's impossible for him to be so powerful. That's right. If we can obtain these secrets, even if we can't surpass 3 stars, we can at least surpass 1 star, or even 2 stars. The hearts of the 8 Sword of Gojosian suddenly trembled. They were extremely excited. It was as if they could see themselves fighting across 2 stars. Trying hard to suppress their rapid breathing, the leader of the group, a mid-level 9-star Sword of Gojosian, whispered, "Catch up with him and surround him. There must be no mistakes." "Don't worry. A mere 5-star Sword of Gojosian. Even if he has the strength of an elite 8-star Sword of Gojosian, facing us, he won't have any power to fight back." Indeed, among the 8 Sword of Gojosian, The most powerful one was a mid-level 9-star sword of Gojosian. 1 or 2 were at the early level 9-star sword of Gojosian. The other 5 were at the peak of the 8-star sword of Gojosian. Even an elite 9-star sword of Gojosian might not be able to win against them. The 8 sword of Gojosian, who were full of confidence, sped up their pursuit. The speed of his footsteps was uniform. Every step he took seemed to have gone through the most precise calculation. It was neither too long nor too short. It was just right. Suddenly, the sword of light flashed and left a sword mark in the air. It pierced through a poisonous snake that flew out from the bushes at the side. The low-level poisonous snake opened its mouth and bit Chumu's neck. Its venom was extremely toxic. If one was bitten and the venom was injected into the body, they would most likely die. However, even though it was fast, Chumu's sword was faster. It had already pierced through the snake's open mouth and killed it. With a flick of his wrist, the sword trembled slightly and the snake's corpse flew out. He was strolling in the courtyard casually. Chumu's footsteps paused and he said softly, "Come out." Suddenly, the sound of wind breaking could be heard. Many figures flew out from all directions and formed a circle to surround Chumu. There were a total of 8 people, and each of them exuded a powerful aura. They were at least at the peak of the 8-star sword of Gojosian. 5 8-star peak stage sword of Gojosian, 2 9-star early stage sword of Gojosian, and 1 9-star mid-stage sword of Gojosian surrounded Chumu. "What can I do for you?" There was no panic or shock as expected. Chumu's tone was very calm, giving people an illusion that Chumu was an expert they could not fight against. "Brother, you're only at the 5th heaven of creation, but you can enter the trial grounds and kill mid-level sword of Gojosian. Your strength is extraordinary. We yearn for it and are also very curious. We would like to borrow your cultivation method to take a look. I hope you can fulfill our small wish," a 9-star early stage sword of Gojosian said with a smile. The others all smiled mockingly and stared at Chumu. They believed that a smart person would know what to choose. "I also hope that you can satisfy a small wish of mine." Chumu didn't agree or refuse. Instead, he said, causing the 8 sword kings to be stunned. "What wish? Tell us, and we should be able to fulfill your wish," the 9-star early stage sword of Gojosian said with a smile. "I've been a little poor recently. I hope you can give me all your savings," Chumu said unhurriedly. Immediately, the 8 sword of Gojosian's faces darkened. Even a fool knew that the other party was toying with them. Chumu also knew that the other party had their eyes on him and treated him as a fat sheep that they wanted to eat. "It seems that you don't intend to cooperate and fulfill our small wish. If that's the case..." This time, it was the mid-stage sword of Gojosian who spoke. He waved his hand and shouted, "Do it. It's fine as long as you don't kill him." In an instant, 5 8-star peak sword of Gojosian unsheathed their swords. Sword light flashed, accompanied by crisp sword cries. 5 sword light were like lightning streaking across the sky, illuminating the darkness. They attacked Chumu from 5 directions. Chumu could feel that the 5 sword light were targeting his limbs and body. Their goal was to make him lose the ability to resist. Their highest estimation of Chumu was the strength of an 8-star elite sword of Gojosian. When 5 8-star peak sword of Gojosian attacked, even a 9-star sword of Gojosian would have to avoid the attack. The other 3 9-star sword of Gojosian sneered. They were all thinking about how to torture Chumu after capturing him so that they could force the information they wanted out of him. In the blink of an eye, the moment the 5 8-star peak sword of Gojosian attacked, Chumu's body also moved. Using the inch step, his body changed continuously. His speed was so fast that it was shocking. The 5 sword of Gojosian missed him. The sword of 5 phases was unsheathed. The sword light was like a white steed flashing across a crack, pushing back the endless darkness. It shone in front of the 8-star peak sword of Gojosian. He was slightly stunned. Then his expression changed drastically. His pupils contracted rapidly, and he was filled with shock. His sword light erupted. Just as he was about to use his movement skill to retreat, the speed of the sword light suddenly increased by several times. There seemed to be a sharp sound of air being torn apart. The dazzling sword light flashed in front of his eyes. Then, he felt a sharp pain in his neck. One sword. Kill. In just an instant, one of the 5 8-star peak sword of Gojoseon was killed by Chu Mu. The pupils of the 3 9-star sword of Gojoseon contracted. Their hearts trembled. Only then did they realize that they had underestimated Chu Mu. In fact, anyone who didn't really know Chu Mu would have underestimated him. It wasn't their fault, and the price of underestimating him was death. Even the 3 of them might not be able to kill an 8-star peak sword of Gojoseon with one sword. In other words, Chu Mu's true strength wasn't on par with an 8-star elite sword of Gojoseon, but a 9-star sword of Gojoseon, or even an elite 9-star sword of Gojoseon. The moment they thought of this, their hearts trembled. Kill him quickly! The 9-star intermediate sword of Gojoseon roared, and quickly drew his sword. The other 2 9-star beginner sword of Gojoseon also drew their swords and executed powerful sword skills to attack Chu Mu. In the face of a terrifying monster who could kill an 8-star peak sword of Gojoseon with one sword, there was only fear in their hearts. Now there was only one thought in their minds, and that was to kill him. If they couldn't kill him, they would definitely end up in a terrible state. 4 8-star peak sword of Gojoseon and 3 9-star sword of Gojoseon besieged Chu Mu. This was the most powerful besiegement that Chu Mu had ever encountered. With his current strength, he couldn't kill all of them at once. Suddenly, the 9-star intermediate sword of Gojoseon unleashed his full strength. After feigning an attack, he actually turned around and dashed away rapidly. His body was only a few meters above the ground, but his speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he was thousands of meters away. This change shocked the others and affected them. Immediately, Chu Mu seized the opportunity to kill 2 8-star peak sword of Gojoseon in a row. Kill! Chu Mu attacked with his sword, showing no mercy. Every sword strike carried a strong killing intent. With 3 8-star peak sword of Gojoseon dead, and the strongest mid-9-star sword of Gojoseon escaping, the remaining few sword of Gojoseon felt a chill run down their spines, thinking of retreating. Chu Mu also noticed this. How could he let these people escape when one of them was caught off guard? In that instant, his top high god rank inextinguishable sword intent and top high god rank law force erupted as he executed his strongest sword skill, long autumn waters. A clear autumn water flowed across the sky, as if it was a long river that came from the void, bringing with it a desolate autumn wind that brushed past everyone's neck. Within the sword light, there was a faint silver light, sharp and unstoppable. With top high god rank inextinguishable sword intent and top high god rank inextinguishable sword intent and second grade sword force, the long autumn water's sword technique's power increased by more than 10 times. Even a top earth rank sword skill couldn't compare to it. This one sword strike was incomparably mysterious. The 5 sword of Gojoseon, regardless of whether they were 8-star or 9-star, all clutched their throats. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they stared at Chu Mu with fear and regret. If they had known that their target's strength was so terrifying, if they had known that their target's sword intent and law force were at the high god rank, there were no ifs. Chapter 1141. The eyes of the 7 corpses were wide open, filled with disbelief, shock and deep regret. Everything they owned had become Chu Mu's spoils of war. He took off the sacred sword armor, spatial rings, and other items and put them into his own spatial ring before quickly leaving. It wouldn't be long before the 7 corpses became delicacies in the mouths of the training beast. The further he went, the stronger the training beasts he encountered. However, Chu Mu was fearless. With the sword in his hand, he continued to fight. There was no one else around, so he could even erupt with all his strength and display it to his heart's content. A towering tree stood on the dark brown, cold and hard ground. Its trunk was very thick, and it would take 30 strong men to wrap their arms around it. It had many branches that extended in all directions, crisscrossing and covering a radius of several thousand meters, like a huge umbrella. It was just that the leaves were sparse, as if it was the autumn season. What was surprising was that the bark of this huge tree was different from ordinary trees. It was covered with scales like the scales of some kind of beast. Each scale was the size of a strong man's palm. Even though there was no light shining on it, it still emitted a black luster, as if it was polished from some kind of rare metal, emitting a cold aura. Chu-mu lurked, thousands of meters away from the huge tree covered with scales. He narrowed his eyes and stared at the trunk of the huge tree. His mind was spinning rapidly, looking for relevant information about the huge tree in front of him. Over the years of cultivation, Chu-mu had been constantly enriching himself, reading various ancient books. Especially before entering the trial world, when he was still on the starship, Yun Feng had shown him some information about the trial world. Among them, there were records about the trial world, although it was only a part of it. The information about the strange tree vaguely flashed in his mind, but he was a little uncertain. However, when Chu-mu's gaze fell on a few training beasts crouching under the huge tree, he was immediately sure. They were a few elephants, or rather, a few elephants that resembled mammoths in appearance. However, they did not have the long fur of mammoths, nor did they have skin. Instead, they had scales. The jet-black scales were exactly the same color and shape as the scales on the trunk of the giant trees. When one of the elephants opened its mouth, Chu-mu's sharp vision also caught sight of it. Other than two long, curved, sharp, sword-like tusks, its mouth was also filled with densely packed teeth. It was even more terrifying than a shark's. Long Xiang. A name flashed through Chu-mu's mind. Dracophant, the elephant race that possessed a trace of the dragon race's bloodline. They had the appearance of an elephant and the scales of a dragon. Their physique was unparalleled and extremely terrifying. That tree is the Draco-elephant tree, Chu-mu secretly thought. He couldn't help but feel a little excited. His sharp gaze searched the tree trunk. Not long after, Chu-mu's pupils contracted and locked onto a fruit the size of a fist. It was in the shape of a chestnut. Its skin was covered with miniature jet-black scales that reflected a trace of metallic luster. There's really a Draco-elephant fruit. Chu-mu's heart trembled as it sped up. He was a little excited. Draco-elephant was a type of beast that possessed a strong physique. Their specialty was their incomparably strong physique. A single charge was enough to destroy a mountain. There was a direct connection between the Draco-elephant tree and the Draco-elephant. The aura of the Draco-elephant would promote the growth of the Draco-elephant tree. On the other hand, the aura of the Draco-elephant tree would also promote the growth of the Draco-elephant tree. When the Draco-elephant tree had grown to a certain extent, it would blossom and bear fruit. The fruit it bore was called the Draco-elephant fruit. It was said that the Draco-elephant fruit contained a trace of pure Draco-elephant bloodline power. Its only use was to refine the body. When beasts ate the Draco-elephant fruit, their bodies would be refined and their physique would become stronger. When humans ate the Draco-elephant fruit, their physique would also be refined and become stronger. Moreover, there was a slight possibility that a trace of the Draco-elephant bloodline could be obtained and the Draco-elephant scales would grow on the body. It wasn't a big deal for beasts to grow scales, but it was strange for humans to grow scales. Fortunately, whether or not a trace of the Draco-elephant bloodline grew scales could be controlled. If one wasn't willing to, they could just refine it. Ever since Chu-mu's physique had broken through to the intermediate 8-star sword of Gojoseon, his subsequent cultivation had become difficult and slow. When he saw the Draco-elephant fruit that could refine his physique, he was elated. After a careful search, Chu-mu discovered that there were a total of 13 Draco-elephant fruits on the Draco-elephant tree. He was thinking about how he could better obtain the 13 Draco-elephant fruit. The 3 gigantic Draco-elephants under the Draco-elephant tree naturally wouldn't let Chu Mu take the Draco-elephant fruits away so easily. It was impossible to fly in the training ground like in the outside world. Among the 3 Draco-elephants, 2 of them emitted auras that had reached the advanced beast training level, comparable to the 9-star sword of Gojoseon. The aura emitted by the largest Draco-elephant tree made Chu Mu feel a sense of danger. However, the allure of the 13 Draco-elephant fruits was too great. No matter what, Chu Mu had to get his hands on them. He believed that with the 13 Draco-elephant fruits, his physique would definitely be refined to the level of the 9-star sword of Gojoseon. At that time, his strength would increase tremendously. Restraining his aura, Chu Mu used the stealth technique that he had learnt during the recruit training. Just when he was about to take action, an unforeseen event occurred. With a long cry, the 3 Draco-elephants seemed to have discovered something. They swung their trunks and their gigantic bodies stood upright. A terrifying aura swept out like a storm, causing sand and stones to fly everywhere. Chu Mu immediately stopped in his tracks and continued to conceal himself. He saw over 10 Sword of Gojoseon charging out from another direction. The Sword of Gojoseon emitted a cold light with a sharp killing intent. The sword was like a flood dragon soaring in the sky, like lightning striking the sky, like a flood bursting through a dam. Their auras were boundless and mighty as they charged towards the 3 Draco-elephants. They swung their trunks, causing the air to shatter and emitting astonishing cracking sounds. The terrifying energy bombarded them. The scales on the 3 Dracophants flickered with a jet-black luster. As soon as they moved, they released an astonishing aura, which was as vigorous as a wild beast. He strode forward with his 4 limbs that were as thick as heavenly pillars. His huge body charged forward, bringing with it a terrifying force as he charged towards the dozen or so Sword Kings. When the 3 Draco-elephants charged, Chu Mu, who was a few thousand meters away, could feel the earth shaking as if 10,000 horses were galloping. Over 10 sword light and over 10 sword techniques bombarded the 3 Draco-elephants. As the jet-black scales flickered, popping sounds rang out continuously. The 10 sword light were all shattered. The 10 sword techniques were actually unable to do anything to the 3 Draco-elephants. The terrifying defensive power of the scales was fully displayed. What a terrifying defense! Chu Mu, who was far away, was secretly shocked. The Draco-elephant's physique was extremely terrifying. Because of the layer of scales, their defensive power was even more shocking. Although the charging Draco-elephants weren't fast, their strength was extremely terrifying. Their aura was unparalleled. The air was directly blasted apart, forming a vacuum. A few Sword of Gojoseon were affected and were sent flying. Their protective sword aura was directly shattered, and they vomited blood. The other Sword of Gojoseon's faces changed drastically. They immediately executed their movement techniques and went around the Draco-elephant. They attacked from the side with their strongest sword technique. Chu Mu calmed down. He wanted to be a fisherman and wait for the right time to pluck the 13 Draco-elephant fruit. Over 10 Sword of Gojoseon, most of them were 8-star Sword of Gojoseon, while a few were 9-star Sword of Gojoseon. They formed a battle formation and besieged the 3 Draco-elephants. The 8-star Sword of Gojoseon's sword techniques couldn't do anything to the Draco-elephants. Only the 9-star Sword of Gojoseon's sword could break the scales of the Draco-elephants and injure them. However, the damage each time was very small. Especially the strongest Draco-elephant. It allowed the 9-star Sword of Gojoseon's sword techniques to land on its body. Its scales completely blocked the attacks, leaving it unscathed. Chu Mu carefully observed for a while. He estimated that if he went all out, using his top divine rank sword intent, rule force, and second rank sword force, as well as his strongest autumn water eternal sky sword art, he should be able to break through the strongest Dracophant's scales and injure it. However, it would be very difficult to kill it. The battle was intense. More than a dozen 8-star and 9-star sword of Gojosian formed a battle formation, besieging the 3 Draco-elephants. It would take some time for them to kill the 3 Draco-elephants. Moreover, the 3 Draco-elephants swung their trunks, causing the air to explode. If one was hit, one's body would be smashed to pieces. The battle gradually reached its climax. The scales of the 3 Draco-elephants were shattered, and bright red blood mixed with traces of golden light seeped out from their wounds. The dozen or so 9-star sword of Gojosian also suffered injuries. However, judging from the situation, the final victor would be the sword of Gojosian, and the 3 Draco-elephants would most likely be killed. After killing the Draco-elephants, not only could one obtain 13 Draco-elephant fruits, one could also obtain 3 Draco-elephant corpses. The Draco-elephant's blood essence also had a certain effect. It's time. Chu-Mu, who was watching from the side, said inwardly. The battle had reached its climax. As long as he was careful, he would definitely be able to obtain 13 Draco-elephant fruit. Activating stealth, Huang Xiaolong stealthily made his way to the Draco-elephant tree, using the surroundings to conceal himself. Until he reached the bottom of the Draco-elephant tree, neither side noticed Chu-Mu's presence. Using the tree trunk as cover, Chu-Mu's figure soared upwards. Borrowing the force of the tree trunk, he was like an agile cheetah. He stepped onto the dragon-elephant tree and headed straight for the first dragon-elephant fruit. Sword origin flickered at the tip of his finger, cutting off the root of the dragon-elephant fruit and storing it in his interspatial ring. His footsteps were extremely nimble, shuttling back and forth on the tree trunk. The second, the third, the fourth. One by one, the dragon-elephant fruits were plucked by Chu-Mu. Very quickly, all 12 dragon-elephant fruits were stored in Chu-Mu's spatial ring. The last dragon-elephant fruit was right above the battlefield. Without any hesitation, Chu-Mu stealthily made his way over. With a swipe of his finger, the dragon-elephant fruit fell and was stored in his interspatial ring. At the same time, one of the sword of Gojosian happened to be retreating, dodging the attack of the Draco-elephant fruit. When he caught a glimpse of Huang Xiaolong from the corner of his eyes, he abruptly raised his head. He was stunned for a moment before he roared, "Who is it? Put down the dragon-elephant fruit!" The roar of this sword king immediately startled the others, and they all hurriedly retreated. When they looked up, they just happened to see the figure in the sky, but before they could react, the figure had already leaped up, jumping up and down the tree trunk, quickly leaving into the distance. Chase! More than 10 sword of Gojosian were infuriated. They had risked their lives to trap the 3 Draco-elephants. If there was one less person, the battle formation wouldn't be complete and they wouldn't be able to withstand the attacks of the Draco-elephants. They wouldn't be able to pluck the dragon-elephant fruit as they wished. Now that the dragon-elephant fruit was taken away, how could they not be angry? Chapter 1142. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Dozens of 8-star and 9-star sword of Gojosian ran after Chu-Mu. The 3 dragon-elephants also raised their heads and saw that the fruit that belonged to them on the dragon-elephant tree was gone. It was snatched away by the despicable human. Furious, they went berserk. They strode forward with their 4 thick pillar-like limbs and ran towards the direction Chu-Mu left in. They were like thousands of soldiers and horses galloping. The earth trembled and countless beasts dodged in fear. The Dracophants were definitely one of the more powerful beasts in the trial world. Being chased by a dozen sword kings, these 9-star sword kings were all very powerful. Adding on the 3 dragon elephants, Chu-Mu didn't have any confidence in dealing with them. Therefore, he could only run. He had already achieved his goal of obtaining 13 Dracophant fruit. This time, the results of his training showed once again. After going into stealth, there was no trace of him. Unless it was someone whose tracking skill was better than Chu-Mu's, they wouldn't be able to find traces of him. After chasing for a distance, the dozens of Sword of Gojoseon were led in the wrong direction by the traps left behind by Chu Mu. Not long after, the 3 Dracophants caught up. They were very sensitive to aura. Therefore, they weren't fooled by the traps left behind by Chu Mu. They continued to chase in the direction where Chu Mu left. However, the Dracophants' running speed was average. It wasn't easy for them to catch up to Chu Mu. While escaping in stealth, Chu Mu took out a Dracophant fruit and observed it carefully. It was the size of a fist. Its scales were black and shiny. When he held it in his hand, it felt cold and heavy. A Dracophant fruit that was the size of a fist weighed more than 500 kilograms. Chu Mu could feel traces of tyrannical aura coming from the Dracophant fruit. 13 dragon elephant fruits should be enough for my flesh to reach the level of 9 stars. I wonder which level of the 9 stars it will reach? Chu Mu thought to himself. Just by sensing the aura, Chu Mu couldn't tell how much the dragon elephant fruit could strengthen his physique. However, Chu Mu was still very happy even if it was only strengthened to the beginner level of the 9-star level. This was because it would take him at least 10 to 20 years to cultivate to the 9-star level even if he was in a place where the power of the stars was relatively strong. The reason why body refining Sword of Gojoseon was relatively rare was that body refining required a lot of resources, more resources than chi cultivation. Otherwise, the cultivation time would be longer. Of course, if it was improved, its strength would be very terrifying. In terms of strength, speed, explosiveness, endurance, defense, recovery, and other aspects, it would be many times better than chi cultivation. The reason why Chu Mu was able to fight a 9-star Sword of Gojoseon at the level of a 5-star Sword of Gojoseon was not only because of his powerful divine wilderness sword essence, but also because of his strong physique. His talent in chi cultivation was very mediocre. Therefore, especially after his Dantian mutated, the difficulty of cultivation had increased. Now that he was able to cultivate to the 5th heaven of creation realm, other than his hard work, he also benefited from a large number of mid-grade elemental elixirs. But the further he cultivated, the more difficult it would be. Therefore, if he wanted to quickly increase his strength, other than increasing his cultivation, he also had to increase his physique. Of course, there were other aspects. After putting away the dragon elephant fruit again, Chu Mu quickly ran. Under stealth, his aura was restrained, making it harder to be discovered. At this moment, a spiritual force swept out in a ripple-like manner. Chu Mu felt it and subconsciously used the Nianji emptiness technique. In an instant, Chu Mu felt that he had been locked onto. He knew that the other party's mastery of the Nianji ripple technique surpassed his own mastery of the Nianji emptiness technique. From this, he could conclude that the swordsman who used the Nianji ripple technique was either a member of the military, or had served in the military and was now retired. From the other party's spiritual force locking onto him, Chu Mu could feel the other party's strength. A 9-star Sword of Gojoseon. Then, there was the sound of wind breaking, and Chu Mu was surrounded. There were more than a dozen people surrounding him. There were 8-star Sword of Gojoseon and 9-star Sword of Gojoseon. Chu Mu also felt that there were more auras not far away. There were 7-star, 8-star, and 9-star cultivators. There were more than 60 of them. This was a huge team with tyrannical strength. It was very shocking. The moment Chu Mu saw these Sword of Gojoseon after being surrounded, he knew that even if he erupted with top-level divine rank sword intent and power of law, he was still not a match for these Sword of Gojoseon. The auras on their bodies were very powerful. Each one of them was a genius. "Oh, so it's you, Aunt!" A frivolous voice sounded. Chu Mu saw a 7-star Sword of Gojoseon walking over. It was the Black Sun Sword Sect disciple who had a small conflict over the registration. In other words, these people were disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect. The Black Sun Sword Sect was the strongest force outside of the Black Sun Galaxy's Heavenly Sword Hall. It was a Dominator-level sect with a deep foundation and countless experts. Each of its disciples had outstanding talent and strength. The peak 9-star sword of Gojoseon, who had locked onto Chu Mu, stared at Chu Mu and said coldly, "You can enter the trial grounds with a cultivation at the 5th heavenly layer of Fortune Realm. Tell me, what secrets do you have?" His aura was about the same level as Shangguan Hua. With Chu Mu's current strength, if he went all out, he might be able to defeat Shangguan Hua, but it wouldn't be that easy. In other words, it wouldn't be easy for him to defeat this peak 9-star sword of Gojoseon of the Black Sun Sword Sect. Especially since he wasn't the only peak 9-star sword of Gojoseon. "I'm a body-refining sword of Gojoseon," Chu Mu said. "It seems that your body-refining attainment is at least at the level of a 7-star sword of Gojoseon." The peak 9-star sword of Gojoseon stared at Chu Mu and said, "Very good." He didn't confirm Chu Mu's strength. That "very good" made the other disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect sneer, as if something was wrong. "You can resist, but you'll die." The disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect locked onto Chu Mu with killing intent. As long as Chu Mu made the slightest move or tried to escape, they would attack and kill Chu Mu on the spot. Chu Mu didn't speak. His brain had been working since he was surrounded, analyzing the situation and looking for the best time to break out. However, these disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect were not a motley crew. They were proficient in cooperation, and each of them had experienced hundreds of battles and were powerful. Most importantly, the contrast in strength was too great. After many calculations and simulations, Chu Mu found that he couldn't resist at all, nor could he escape. His heart sank, but Chu Mu still didn't give up. As long as there was a glimmer of opportunity, he would seize it. "Very good. It seems that you're very sensible. Take him away." As soon as the voice fell, the tall and strong 7-star sword of Gojoseon of the Black Sun Sword Sect, who had collided with Chu Mu before, strode over with a ferocious smile. He pulled out his sword and put it on Chu Mu's neck. The cold sword edge made Chu Mu's skin shiver. "Go." He pushed Chu Mu's shoulder hard and walked forward with Chu Mu. Soon, Chu Mu saw other sword of Gojoseon, who were not disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect. It seemed that, like him, they had been caught by the disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect. Including himself, there were a total of 13 sword of Gojoseon captured. The highest cultivation was at the middle stage of the 8th heaven of the Fate Realm, and the lowest was naturally Chu Mu, who was at the late stage of the 5th heaven of the Fate Realm. Chu Mu's arrival attracted their attention. Each and every one of them was very surprised. However, the current them, to put it bluntly, had all been reduced to prisoners. Each and every one of them was thinking of how to escape, so they naturally didn't pay attention to Chu Mu. In this way, Chu Mu stayed there and carefully observed the surroundings. He didn't focus on cultivation, nor did he dare to take out the dragon elephant fruit to eat. If there was a chance for him to refine 13 dragon elephant fruits and improve his body-refining cultivation to 9 stars, even if it was only at the early stage of the 9 stars, his strength would increase greatly. If he went all out, these disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect would definitely not be able to stop him. They could even kill him. Unfortunately, during the past 3 days, there were people guarding them all the time, and he couldn't find the slightest opportunity. It was worth mentioning that during the past 3 days, the 3 dragon elephants rushed over and were besieged by the disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect, which made Chu Mu more directly see the cooperation and strength of the disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect. During the past 3 days, the number of sword of Gojoseon captured by the disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect increased to 20. The sword of Gojoseon with the highest cultivation was at the late stage of the 8th heaven of the sword of Gojoseon. Chu Mu felt that these disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect must have some purpose. As expected, today, 50 disciples of the Black Sun Sword Sect surrounded the 20 captured sword of Gojoseon. The leader of the Black Sun Sword Sect, a peak 9th heaven of the sword of Gojoseon, glanced at them and said with his eyes shining, Listen, we don't mean any harm to you. The purpose of inviting you here is that we plan to cooperate with you to get some rare treasures. Humph, you make it sound nice. One of the captured Sword of Gojosian snorted. Indeed, he made it sound nice. What invitation! The 20 people present were all captured by the threat of death, not the so-called invitation. As for the so-called cooperation, if he really believed that, he would be a fool. Cut the crap. You only have 2 choices. You can either cooperate with us obediently or die. As soon as the word die was uttered, everyone involuntarily trembled with fear. At this time, if they said another word, they were afraid that they would be killed like chickens. Let's go. With a low roar, the 20 Sword of Gojosian were driven forward. Along the way, Chu Mu had been thinking about the purpose of the disciples of the Black Sun Sword sect. Associating it with the previous words, a clear idea gradually emerged in his mind. Rare treasures. Yes, the purpose of these disciples of the Black Sun Sword sect was a certain rare treasure. Then, it was very likely that the disciples of the Black Sun Swordsmanship sect had found some kind of rare treasure somewhere. However, given their strength, it was impossible or very difficult for them to get the treasure. Even if they could get it, they would suffer great losses. Therefore, the disciples of the Black Sun Sword sect captured a group of Sword of Gojosian to serve as cannon fodder and help them to seize some rare treasure.